I'm sure you have seen the profiles of the key facilitators. Professor ICRE is one of the leading system scientists of the world. He will take us through this wonderful session to begin with. And then we have Professor Pavel Senkel. He's been in many innovative institutions, starting with Schumacher College. Now he's leading Prescott College in Arizona, US. And he looks into regenerative learning. And he uses what we teach in class, he actually uses in the curriculum in a full scale. And you would have heard Professor Devdutt Panda when we had this pre-conference event. Some of you might have seen that he presented or he shared with you how to develop your papers using systems approach. So he gave you so many useful tips for developing your papers. And when I see through some of the works of the papers that have come, some of them transform their way of really developing their papers. They're PhD works, but it has been so beautifully transformed. So it's been a great pleasure with interacting with my colleagues to develop this workshop. There are many. In fact, here we have one of the other leading system scientists is Gary Smith. He was the past president of the International Society for Systems Sciences, which is almost a 60-year-old entity. 60, 70 years old entity. Yeah. And he kind of handles one of the most challenging organizations, Airbus, where he's trying to bring in systems approach to manage, to operate Airbus. So that's the kind of audience we have, and we have, of course, many of you professors from many places. All of you are research scholars. It was very competitive to enter this workshop because we limited the number to 40. Once we closed for a while, hi Sashir, hi. So once we closed the registration, we had left one website open, so they started filling in there, so we had to close. We wanted fewer numbers, so that, or optimal numbers, so that the benefit of the expertise that is available here gets to you and you're able to make use of it. We are also privileged. I mean, you can see the value of this workshop. We have Dr. Prashant Nannavare, who is actually Secretary to Government of Maharashtra. And he, I mean, of course, he had many programs up there. And he decided to be here today. I don't know how much sacrifice you'd have done to be here. So we have very, very interesting group here. And it's wonderful to have you all. And I would, of course, we would go through this process of the workshop learning about systems. And who else but ICRE would lead us through.
Thank you, Amar. Thank you, fellow guests, and good morning, everyone. It seems to me that this morning is typical of the world we're beginning to inhabit, or perhaps have inhabited for a long time, that we should always be compared to deal with surprise and the notion of emergence. So what is happening this morning is an emergent phenomenon despite the best planning or organizing. And so we'll make this day, I hope, an exciting day for you. I've been given the privilege of starting off, and I've organized the first hour and a half as what I and others, drawing originally on the work of many systems scholars, West Churchman, Peter Checkland and others, a process of systemic co-inquiry. And I'm inviting you all to join a systemic co-inquiry, and I'm going to use some slides and other things, some exercises to unpack that. Can we turn the lights off?
Yes, yes.
Well, that's me. Amongst other things, I'm president of the International Federation for Systems Research, and Gary's just been president of the ICRE, the International Society for Systems Sciences. Both they and AS, the Consortium for Regenerativeness here, are both members of our International Federation for Systems Research, which is a peak body with membership of many systems organisations across the world. I'll say more about that later in the event here. I'm also Professor Emeritus from the Open University, where I've been Professor of Systems since 1994. Now, I want to invite you to think about what we might do here this morning. I'm inviting you to begin a process of systemic inquiry or co-inquiry, and in the first instance it will be with those on your table. I'm going to explain what I mean by systemic inquiry, and it's an advisable place to start a systemic inquiry. A good point to start is to ask the question, what is it that you do when you do what you do? So I'd ask all of you to try and get your heads around that. Who are you and what is it that you do when you do what you do? And I want to try and unpack the answers to that question in terms of inviting you to reflect on practice, what it is that you do, your practices, and the practices that are of primary concern to you, and perhaps the practices that you anticipate developing as a result of being here. Regenerative practice, systems research, transdisciplinary research, etc. So by understanding your practice, you can then begin to appreciate whether you're practicing, as we say, systemically or systematically, and whether you can draw in systems thinking, systems science into what it is that you do. So why a systemic inquiry? Well, inquiry is the reflective learning in the literal sense. It is the thinking about thinking, doubting about doubting, learning about learning, and hopefully knowing about knowing. And there's a good rationale for thinking in terms of systemic inquiries because of the uncertainty and complexity in the situations we confront, the Anthropocene world that we humans have co-created, as a response to the rhetoric about being more joined up or holistic or integrated. These are very easy words, but how do they get translated into practice? How do you do these things? Where is the theory-informed practice or praxis? We also live in a projectified world. The globe adopted a couple of hundred years ago the idea that most of our activity and our practice should be encompassed in the institution called a project. But a project in its institutional form pre-specifies what we intend to do, what our objectives might be, what we're going to deliver, how soon we're going to deliver, and projects as institutional devices are really poorly equipped to deal with situations where you don't know what to do. You could argue that globally, in the face of climate change, we don't know what to do. Projects are therefore not the best way to do them, often. An inquiry-based approach also enables managing or researching for emergence, as I said. It's not about deterministic action and production of outcomes in the anticipation the world will stay stable enough for you to deliver what you thought you would 3 or 5 years before. And during inquiry, ethics arise in context-related action, not as a set of defined rules. So this is a figure that if you've done Psychology 1 at undergraduate level, you may have encountered. Some people will perhaps look at this image and see an image of a young, beautiful woman. Who can see that? Some people will look at it and see an old crone, an old elderly woman. Who can see that? Who can see both? So what do we take from this little simple test? That shown an image, this group of people has vastly different experiences. Without a distinction, you can have no experience. So a lot of you did not experience the elderly woman. So if we know that about ourselves and the way our cognition works, then we know that whenever we bring different groups of people together, we will carry with us different experiences, and we'll see different things, and we will see things differently, and we'll have different histories out of which we interpret what we're doing. If we take a situation of concern, and we'll come back to that, it could be a farm, a watershed, a river valley, then what our undergraduate education often creates. I did an undergraduate degree in agricultural science, and I can testify to this type of division. When we see a situation, the dairy specialist will see certain things, the agronomist will see other things, the sociologist might see another set of things, and an ecologist another set of relationships. So these disciplinary perspectives that we build different ways of seeing and prioritising and privileging, and dare I say it, a huge amount of investment in development by various countries in attempts to what might be called develop the other without understanding the local situation. Now, if you're going to come together like a group like this, how do you avoid talking past each other? How do you make sure that you listen? How do you deliver your benefits as a group? This is a model of a systemic inquiry I ran with colleagues with the English Environment Agency around the implementation of the European Water Framework Directive. And we were working in groups, and they were, as an organisation, responsible for implementing the European Water Framework Directive, talking past each other and having a very command and control structure whereby the majority of people working on the implementation didn't know where they sat in the overall scheme of things. Now, I'm saying this because if we're going to work effectively as a group, then it's necessary, I think, to do some contracting for how we're going to be here as a group today, perhaps all week, if you stay in contact for that. So if you haven't already done so, can you please introduce yourself for just 3 minutes each? And can you discuss at your table how, based on your experience of working in groups, what experiences you've had to make it a bad experience for others or a bad experience for yourself? How do you undermine good group work? You can have a discussion about that, and then I'll make some suggestions as to what we might do next. Please.
chat a little bit?
Hello, hello. Yes, that's okay.
Yes, it is coming out. Because
if you've thought of some ways to make groups function poorly, perhaps you could write them down on the post-it notes on your table, just so that you can check later whether that's what anyone does. Now, I might interrupt you there. I'm sorry. If you haven't fully introduced yourselves, please do that over the morning. Is that me? What I'd like to do now, because we don't have a lot of time this morning, and normally what I would do in a situation like this where I've invited you to name the things that get in the way, I'd ask you to reframe the bad things as good things that we will do in our group together. Now, I'm not going to go through that process today, but based on my own experience of doing this many times, I'm going to make some suggestions to you as to how we might contract to be together today. So, know each other's names. That's, I hope you've now introduced yourselves. Check out your own understandings. When we're having discussions or when you're having discussions at a table, please don't agree with your own misunderstandings. Group work is full of people who agree with their own misunderstandings before they check out with others whether they understand them or not. Appreciate the diversity of experiences in the room and at your table, and utilize those in conversation. Recognize that it's okay to ask questions. Say that you don't know. Manage our speaking time. It's easy to sometimes speak over or too much. And a key aspect of very effective group work is to provide others with the experience of being listened to, which is not to say that you can't say things, but it's the balance between the listening and the saying. If you find yourself discussing things you wish to keep confidentially, then make it known to others that you want that to stay in the room or in the group. I presume we have from the organisers permission to take photos, so that's happening, I'm afraid. But if you have problems with it, you should advise the organisers. There's the question of finishing on time and starting on time, which in as I said to Amar a minute ago, in Bahasa Indonesian, which I know some of, there's a phrase called jam karet, which means rubber time. So but we should not. We should try to avoid too much rubber time as we go through the day. And the only way this contract can be delivered is if you monitor it and deliver it yourself and speak about it. So I'm going to ask someone to distribute one copy each of those things to each table, and so that will be there for you to. Thanks, Sean. Sean, oh, that's okay. Thank you. We're meeting people here for the first time. In your group, you'll get to know some people quite well, so please say goodbye if you're departing and don't just disappear. And always seek out opportunities to provide feedback to both the organisers and each other. And consider right here at the start how you might commit to follow-up. If things take your interest or attract your attention, or that you feel you want to follow up, please think about how you'll do that. Okay, well, thank you for that time. I've just got a couple of other little contracting issues. I'm drawing on some teaching resources that we've developed at the Open University in the UK, and they are animations and voiceovers. And I haven't been able to change a few terms in them that are specific to our students. So I apologise that there's just a couple of bits of language that you may not follow. The main terms that you'll hear are terms like TMA, tutor marked assignment, EMA, end of module assignment or assessment, STIP, systems thinking in practice, and PG, postgraduate. So those are the acronyms that you may hear in the animations. So let's move on. So the inquiry meta question that I'm inviting you to consider today is what do you do when you do practice? How do we lay down the pathway of our living and our doing? This is a critical question at this particular historical moment where a business as usual approach seems totally inappropriate and perhaps, in fact, non-viable. So there's a question of another meta question which I'm posing today and for which this whole event is posing is, can the interplay between cybernetics and systems understandings in a form of transdisciplinary action facilitate transformation to something better? And one of my areas of research and scholarship over the years has been moving towards what I call systemic governing or systemic governance. And I'll be saying more of that later in the week. But today, I'm inviting you to appreciate the why, what and hows of new practices or current practices or better practices that you may be engaged in or wish others to engage in. Now, at each table, you've got some A3 paper and you've got post-it notes. And I want you to, if you could, think about if you had to draw a picture for your brother, your sister, your mother, your granddaughter, your grandson, or one of your children, of what is involved in practice, your practice. How would you draw a conceptual model of your practice? Be as creative as you like. So I'm going to give you about just under 10 minutes to do that. If you feel like doing it as a collage of a collective inquiry at your table, by all means, but start off thinking about it individually. Yeah, please do. Oh, questions anytime. Yes.
I have a doubt. I want to clarify before I proceed.
Yes.
Are all systems cybernetic?
No. Well, I'm referring to any practice that you engaged in. You may be engaged in practice as a mother, or as a researcher, as a facilitator, as a walker.
Understood, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Sorry?
If you want to repeat, we didn't hear at the back.
Hello. Hello. So, I purely came out of my ignorance. I wanted to know, seeing that previous slide, which was talking about cyber systemic inquiry. So, I had a question in my mind. Are all systems cybernetic? That's why I asked.
It's a good question, and I'll be returning to it this morning so we can go over it again.
Thank you. Oh.
Just start somewhere. You're trying to build a picture to show someone else what your practice is that you're concerned with. Or it can be just practiced generically, if you like, but there must be a practice that you could. Well, perhaps just a few more minutes and then we'll move on, but we'll be coming back to this during the session. Just spend a few minutes sharing your thinking with other people at your table and try to answer this question, which we all do. So a practice we have in common. Keep it on your table because I'll ask you to put it on. Thanks. Okay, I can see some people have finished, some haven't. There's still a conversation going on. So if you think about walking as a practice, how many people at your table said something like, well, walking as a practice happens when a motivation occurs, or a child puts one foot in front of another, or something like that. Who'd like to volunteer a response as to how walking arises as a practice? Huh? Having a particular goal? Okay, yes, that's right. Thank you. Oh, I think we can shout out probably enough. Yeah.
Thank you.
Having a particular goal was what was said down here at the front. Any other want to offer some?
Good morning. I walk daily for about 30 minutes and it's a conscious effort. I feel very relaxed, peaceful, and while walking I also look around plants, birds, people, and I feel rejuvenated after that 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. There are different answers to this question, and what I experienced, that answer there is an answer to the question, how do I engage in my well-being on a daily basis? Walking is a practice. So, Gary?
I've got one for you, Ray. It depends on context, depends on your mood, depends on how old you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, depends on lots of things. So it just depends.
All right. Well, the answer I'm going to offer for walking is if you imagine someone put a hook through my collar here and lifted me up like a crane, and I kept moving my legs in the way that I'm moving them, would walking as a practice happen? So if the answer is no, then walking as a practice must happen in the relational dynamics between a body and a medium, the floor. You remove the relationship between leg and medium, and walking as a practice doesn't happen. Now, this may seem a trivial exercise, but to me it's the absolute central exercise of being able to think systemically. Because to think systemically, you need to be able to think in relational terms. And we can take this as an analogy, if you like, or a metaphor for the human condition. When I'm walking, the quality of my walking is mediated by my sandals. So we can say a body, humans, a medium, the earth, and institutions and technologies which we humans invent, sandals, mediate the quality of our walking on the earth. So let me claim right at the start my perspective, and that is the condition, the issue we face as humanity at the moment is not the question of saving the earth. The question is what is going to be the quality of the walking of humans on earth into the future, the quality of the relational dynamic between humans and the biosphere. Hence, I think the central theme of this event will be about regenerativeness and how that as a particular practice gives rise to particular qualities of walking, if you like. So I'll invite you to think in these relational terms. And with all due respect, whenever I ask this question of a large audience anywhere in the world, 99% of the answers are given in something that is causal, linearly causal. Something happens, a goal is a linear causal answer. And that is the mainstream paradigm in which we inhabit the earth, in my view. And that's the difference between projects, for example. Projects are essentially linear manifestations of practice, and systemic inquiries are systemic relational manifestations of practice.
Setting a goal can be a non-linear thing.
It can be.
It depends on the methods, it depends on the way we do the walking, we do the practice. No? Thank you.
Yeah.
I think setting a goal while you are walking can be seen as a non-linear thing, but it depends on the way, if you are doing some steps, returning, or the going on is the important thing, I guess.
I agree, but this then highlights the issue of how language begins to be conserved and used in a particular group, a work group or a cultural group, and language can carry with it the entailments of different types of practice. But the word goal itself is a highly problematic word in the project world of big business and other things of that nature. It's not, the great danger of goal-seeking behaviour is that people pursue the goal and remain and fail to be open to the changing circumstances and therefore adjust to those circumstances. Okay, welcome everyone who've just come in. Thanks. Let me, this is just an image about walking. Let me give you another example from relational thinking. This example comes from Gregory Bateson, who's well-known historical systems thinker. His father and grandfather were both involved in evolutionary biology and other things, so they had an interest in biology and evolution. And if you think of another practice which we humans can do, and that is climbing. I mean, what is it that humans developed at a particular historical moment that enabled them to be able to climb? Or you could extend it to all primates, as this image suggests. And what the point that Gregory Bateson made is that the property of our bodies that enables climbing is the opposable thumb. The fact that we can bring a thumb to each of those fingers. Without that, we wouldn't be able to grasp and climb. And so he asks, why is it that in language that we currently live, we refer to our hands as having 4 fingers and a thumb? That is 5 things, rather than a series of relationships. It's the relationships between these that is the key issue, not the things in and of themselves. So again, and we can think of this in many other terms. I mean, a swimmer can't swim without the relationship with the water, for example. We can't be humans without a relationship with the atmosphere because we have to breathe oxygen. This is the animation I'm going to show, so I'll go ahead with it and then we can ask some questions later.
This animation is designed to help you situate yourself within the module Managing Change with Systems Thinking in Practice. It is also designed to invite a process of reflecting on what it is that you will do as you work through the module. This formulation is a way of asking you to think of yourself as a practitioner who is going to learn how to practice what the module has to offer. The core practice of the module is Systems Thinking in Practice, or STIP, used to effect change in situations of concern to you. Although you may not think of yourself in these terms, you are already a practitioner in that in daily life we all engage in different practices and thus become, by doing them, a practitioner. Parenting, driving, emailing, holidaying, modelling, presenting, the list is endless. A starting point for this module is to recognise that we usually do not give a lot of thought to what we do as we perform our daily tasks. If we begin a process of reflecting on our practices, then the first point to make is that all practice is situated. Your TB872 practice is situated within the Managing Change with Systems Thinking in Practice module that the module team has designed and for which you have registered. You are not alone. Others have also registered. You can understand yourself as part of a community of interest. Over time, and with use of the module forum, you may become part of a community of conversation, even a community of practice. As you participate in this module, you will also be embedded in other situations, your work, family, daily living, holidays, etc. You will have different practice roles in each of these. Despite these different situations, your practice will have some features in common. Firstly, your practice is situated and embodied. You are central to your own practice. The second generic feature is that as a practitioner, you have a history, what we will call a tradition of understanding, out of which you think and act. The third generic feature is that all practice is relational, or what in this module will be called systemic. Let's think about the situation you now find yourself practicing in, the module in its broadest sense, with its many different elements, the study guide, the books, the forum, other students, your tutor, etc. As a practitioner, One way of thinking about this situation is to step back from it and imagine you are considering a bounded situation which becomes the focus of your concern. Your practice will be learning, which will include inquiring and interacting with others during that process. You will need to engage with the situation and be responsive to feedback. This process will influence how you are thinking and what you will learn. To help you engage with your TB872 situation, the module provides two important elements. Firstly, a rich array of ideas, theories, and explanations about managing change with systems thinking in practice. These will be made available to you through various readings and audio material grounded in examples. Together, these ideas will form a framework. Secondly, you will find support from a series of methods and tools that will be introduced and demonstrated. You will use the framework of ideas and the methods to explore and engage with your situation. You will also write about your experience through the forum, TMAs, and eventually your EMA, and in doing so, will get feedback from your situation that will inform your systems thinking in practice on an ongoing basis. When put all together, we have what we will refer to as the PFMS heuristic to use as a way of thinking about your practice. The focus of Part 2 of the module will be a systemic inquiry into your own systems thinking in practice. The PFMS heuristic will be used to structure the material and your inquiry. You can step out of the dynamic of your own practice and use the model as a heuristic for reflection, for inquiry and learning. Later, we will describe this as moving up and down levels of abstraction. Before proceeding further with your inquiry, it might be helpful to explore how adept you are at relational thinking, which is key to understanding the PFMS heuristic as well as STIP practice for managing change. Before continuing this animation, take a short walk across the room and then explain to yourself, or anyone you are with, the process by which walking happens as a practice. When we have invited participants in workshops or lectures to do this activity, it constantly surprises us how few are able to describe walking as a practice that arises in the relationship between a person and a medium, such as the floor is depicted here. Even though moving the legs, this person will be left hanging rather than walking. If you destroy the relationship person-medium, then the practice of walking does not happen. The same relational dynamics as walking apply to the PFMS heuristic. Practice is made up of all the elements acting relationally. Inquiring into your own systems practice, understood as a relational dynamic, is the core of Part 2. To fully appreciate this, you will have to develop your abilities as a relational or systemic thinker. Relational thinking is not that common and not easy for many people. The journey you will undertake will put you in touch with your own systemic sensibilities, expand your systems literacy, and enable development of your STIP capabilities. So, to understand practice in general and your STIP capabilities for managing change in particular, the focus of Part 2, let's unpack the PFMS heuristic a little more. Begin by asking yourself where in the heuristic model are there possibilities for learning and change. You might like to stop here and write down what you think.
We're not going to stop.
We can see the following possibilities. Learning about each of the PFMS as separate elements. Learning about all the elements acting together. This could be described as learning about your overall practice performance or how you enacted the different elements in a specific situation. Your new learning could be expressed as new knowledge or new ways of knowing about the PFMS elements, innovation or change in the situation, change in the practitioner's understanding, a set of feedback processes that lead you to make changes in your practice and future, changes in social relations with others, remembering that practice is usually carried out with someone else. In Part 2, we would like you to use the PFMS model heuristically as a means to explore and understand your own practice in relation to TB872 and beyond. In the design of the module, we will implicitly, if not explicitly, be inviting you to see yourself as engaged in two forms of practice, namely, as a student learning through TB872 and as a systems thinking practitioner engaged in improving your practice for managing systemic change in situations of concern to you. In starting out, we make no assumptions about the skill level of your systems thinking in practice. In parts 2 and 3, and for the EMA, we will ask you to engage with a particular situation of concern to you using STIP. You will carry on 2 systemic inquiries concurrently. Experience shows you will gain benefits from the relationship between the 2 inquiries, though it may be a bit of a juggle at times. Both inquiries have a structured endpoint in terms of the EMA and the end of your module study, but as a STIP practitioner, both can be carried on through the rest of your life. There is no endpoint other than the one you set for yourself, as you can always improve your STIP practice. So far, the PFMS heuristic has focused on a single person or...
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. There's a third block of this module, and it goes on to talk about practicing with others and how one facilitates social learning systems and communities of practice. But I don't think we've got time to dwell on that today. So I'd just like to invite you to spend a few minutes reviewing what you were thinking about in terms of your own practice and drawing some conclusions in your group about what you've picked up from that animation. And by all means, ask me questions, challenge my assumptions, or whatever you wish to do, or agree with them wholeheartedly, however. So just a few minutes in each group.
In my groups all the time.
So I think, am I finishing at 10:30? 10:45. 10:45. Okay, well that's much better. Yeah.
So we squeeze in towards the end. I will.
All right. Well, no, I don't want to cut you off.
No, it's fine. It usually takes some time to warm up and.
Yeah. Now it's getting going. Right.
The group to be with a summary. Because some of us came in kind of in the middle.
Summary.
Just at the
Well, educating people about doing systems thinking in practice is to get them to admit or to see that without them as practitioners, the practice doesn't happen. So that we as embodied, situated people are central to our own practice. But we tend to focus on practice as the situation or the problem or the out there rather than here.
Instead of working on us.
And being conscious about our history and our choices about framing and other things determines what that is and how we might go about it. And as a model to try and understand practice, any form of practice, systemically and relationally, rather than causal, linearly causal, and to get
Which you talked about,
Yeah.
is this an acronym for this practice feedback
Yeah,
modeling
yeah.
situation?
Yeah, it's just an acronym. Yeah.
You said, let's say the and practicing your everything. So what I saw was basically my strength was consistency, then the planning, and
Yeah.
then taking the continuous feedback from others, and those are the things that I do.
Uh-huh.
So what is that still?
I would interpret those as characteristics of the enactment of your practice. but I mean, you must, when you do what you do, you must draw on particular ideas about what constitutes good or what constitutes bad, and they must come from somewhere historically. And perhaps you're open to learning about whether they're good or bad or not, and being used well. Does what you do make a difference in the situations of concern to you? That's how you could carry out that inquiry.
So you are saying whenever I do any task in a day, whether that is holistic or whether it is only biased with my thinking, or are you suggesting that we should look at it from the holistic?
Well, I think one should always be prepared to be one is doing it. Ask the question: what am I doing when I'm doing what I do? Because there creates a space for reflection and saying, yes, it's good, no, it's not.
Gary also told it depends on the context. Sometimes I might be stressed, and that is the motivation for me to go walking. Sometimes it might be that because it's
but walking as a process, I mean. A different thing.
that causation part.
Yeah.
Some of them didn't get this kind of full form.
No, I'm. Sorry, I should have distributed that around. I've just got a copy of the PFMS for everyone, so here. Sorry, I should have given it to you before. Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you distribute it. One each.
Practice or practitioner?
Practitioner, framework,
methods and
situation.
The S is situation.
Not system.
Not system. Yeah, system is the whole.
Well, yeah, could be.
I don't know the previous answer because maybe if you can set a goal, you can have this goal accomplished as a part of a bigger system, as one part of it.
Yeah, I don't want to be dogmatic about it, but I mean, there's been a lot of action over many years in government and public policy circles about using targets.
Yeah.
And a tremendous amount of the behaviour of organisations, particularly in the public sector, about meeting targets is that the targets are set for certain phenomena to avoid crowding in hospital rooms or something other like this.
Yeah.
And people don't address the phenomena. They address they play games, the targets, to get the result, which might be more money for meeting the target. So the question is, with a goal or a target, you need to be able to maintain focus on the phenomena or the situation for which you're talking about, recognizing that they are constantly changing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we work with a lot of communities, and together they have like an horizon.
Yeah.
And setting very short goals, short term. So.
My preference is to use the word purpose.
Purpose. Ah, okay. Good language is important. Yes, repeat it again. Sorry.
My preference is to use the word purpose, not to use goals or targets.
Okay.
Or objectives.
Okay. Yeah. It's more like a fixed thing, right?
Well, a purpose is something socially negotiated and
Yeah, agreed.
agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm always sorry in events like this to interrupt good conversations. I apologise. I'm being run by the emotion of time, and you're being run by the emotion of conviviality. So I apologise. I just want to say that the PFMS heuristic is a device, and the module it comes from is to enhance people's systemic practice and effectiveness at becoming practitioners, and to understand practice itself in systemic terms. And one of the most difficult things for our students at the Open University, where we have mature age students just like us here, is to see themselves as absolutely central to their own practice, that practice is embodied and situated. You can't have a practice without a practitioner. And so that becomes quite central, because we've lived a world, often with projects and other types of things, or with science, of seeing the focus as the thing out there, however we label that situation. And it's something outside ourselves. Those are important, but it's the dynamics between all of these that become important. So if you think about us as practitioners, I mean, we're part of a group of a species called mammals who have particular characteristics. And those characteristics are essentially relational in nature, particularly in the early life of the young mammal. Whether it's suckling behaviour, whether it's play, whether it's developing language. I have some small granddaughters, 3 and 10 months. And so as a grandfather, I can take a more backward observational perspective on how language develops. And you see that language develops by the constant interaction of people, mothers, others, in this relational dynamic in which sounds are made and suddenly objects appear in the language, a flower or a cup. But the object is the result of a long and relational process. So nouns as objects don't exist independently of this process of distinction that starts in a young mammal. And that is how we come to live in language. And we humans have been extremely creative, developing many, many languages. And those languages act, in my view, as what we might call social technologies, like the shoes. The languages mediate our relationship with each other and with the earth. So the words we use, the way we use them, and not even the words, because sometimes we use the same words but talk past each other because we have a different model of what those words mean than others. So hence why diagramming is a very useful thing to use in practice, because it brings your models into the open. And so I would claim that we need to think about language more in terms of something that uses us rather than something that we use, because the way it's structured leads you to do certain things. There are language groups on Earth, the Hopi, in some of the North American Indian tribes, who use languages that are only verb-based. So a verb-based language is a language that will have you constantly relating, because that's what verbs do. Whereas noun-based languages distance you from the object, the thing, the situation, the reality, etc. I just thought I should share me as a practitioner, as a 27-year-old researcher doing fieldwork for my PhD in Bali, Indonesia, driving a Yamaha 90. I recognise the streets around here and the villages very much because Bali was not dissimilar. So immersion in other languages and other cultures open your eyes if you allow them to be opened. And out of my work, this is what I've come to say or make as a claim about practitioners and what practitioners do when they practice. So all practice is situated and embodied. All observations require an observer observing. Everything said is said by someone to someone, and we as a species live in language. All knowing is doing, and doing precedes knowledge. All being, knowing and doing is relational. All observers, practitioners, actors have a history, a tradition of understanding out of which they think and act. And institutions and technologies, by the way, I use the word institutions like an institutional economist would use that word to mean all the norms and rules that we humans invent. So that, as you will appreciate, is a huge number of things. And we humans live with a desire for explanation, and science itself is a practice, and it realises particular types of explanations which are socially determined or culturally accepted. One of my other practices, of course, is authoring, and this is just some of the things that I've authored. The latest one. So I now want to pick up the F part of the PFMS heuristic. The F part can be one of three things. It can be how we choose purposefully to frame a situation that is of concern to us. It can be a choice of a theoretical framework that we might use in social science research to study or analyse something. We use Foucault's theory of X or Y. And it is the framework that we bring from our history, our tradition of understanding, which is there implicitly and often not explicitly. There are other terms you can use, one's worldview or Weltanschauung, to describe this. But all thinking and talking involves framing, and since frames come in systems, a single word typically activates a frame. So this applies to many of the things we're going to be talking about here and many of the things that I'm talking about. But framing choices create initial starting conditions, and they determine the pathway dependencies and the lineages, and they bring you into contact with the institutions or social technologies. Here's just a common framing. Is this the real world? Yes, okay. But we choose never to share or educate this framing. This particular framing of the world shows how big Africa is in contrast to other countries, etc. So it reveals things that the historical framing doesn't reveal. I'm going to have to duck over a few things here because I want to if you choose to frame situations as systems, and that's a framing choice, In the systems community that's developed over many, many years, there are different lineages and traditions. And within those different traditions, some people see systems as things out there. We can talk about the traffic system in Bhubaneswar. We can talk about the finance system as a global system, etc. But whenever we use that word system in those ways, we're using it in its everyday sense, and we're never quite sure what the noun is, because evoking a system has to invoke a set of relationships and a boundary judgment. Something's in the system, something's not in the system. So when you come into the systems world, you have to be aware that there are some people who use the word systems in an everyday sense. It generally connotes a set of things that are somehow related. They can use it as an ontology. We can talk about the Zim University system as if it existed as a system. Or we can say that a system is something we will formulate as part of our practice to use in a situation of concern to us. And we will build a conceptual model, a device of a system to be able to learn our way into improving that situation. And in that case, the concept system is an epistemological device. It's a way of knowing about situations. So those are choices you have to tease out, and you have to ask the question when you hear people speaking about systems, is that the everyday use? Is it an ontological use? Is it an epistemological use of the word system? And within the systems and cybernetics traditions of intellectual life, there are a whole host of different concepts that you can draw on, just as you can in any disciplinary field. Perspective, systemic, systematic, system of interest, purpose, purposeful, boundary, boundary judgment, emergence, hierarchy, layered structure, feedback, positive and negative feedback, control, communication, transformation. These are all key systems concepts which it would require another week or weeks of study to get to introduce to you and make actionable. In the work we've done, we've developed this, what we call, it's a yin-yang type duality. So that the walking example that I gave you and the answers you gave me, I said, revealed how embedded in the systematic paradigm we are, particularly the linear causal paradigm. And this is true of many disciplines and professions and modelling and other things. And linearity, of course, has its place. There are special cases, but linearity, it turns out, is often only a special case of the systemic relational dynamics. And so in our practice, we are trying to encourage our students to develop the capabilities to move between systemic and systematic practice, understood as a duality, as a totality. At some moments, it might be good to engage in goal-defined behaviour. It's a sort of systematic practice. At other times, if you do that in a particular context, it negates the systemic nature and it might lead you into the wrong direction. So those are the sorts of things. We tease out. So these are characteristics of systematic behaviour. Log frames, some M&E practices, evidence-based decision-making, targets, goals, deliverables, knowledge assets, deliverables, etc. These are widespread. I'm sure you've encountered them all. And again, they may have their place, but the place shouldn't be the dominant place they have at the moment. We also tend to focus on tools. The number of research projects I've had to review or for the European Union where someone wants to develop a new model or a new tool. And in very few of the research applications do they understand the tool as something that has to be embedded in a situation and in practice. So a tool is only as good as the relational dynamic between the practitioner and the context of its enactment. So the antidote to this is to appreciate and enact systemic relational dynamics and to see technologies and institutions as how they mediate the relational dynamics between people and or situations. So I'm going to finish up. There's about 10 minutes left or 15 minutes left. So I'm going to leave you with a little exercise which is to do with water catchments. And it comes from our own work, and you may not know much about water catchments, but that doesn't matter. You can use the PFMS heuristic in your or your personal experience. But if we take this particular image, which comes from the Marche region of northern Italy. Over on the right you see Italy, and this is the red area is the Marche, this is the Adriatic Sea, and this is the stream, the river system that goes down and flows out into the Adriatic Sea. So if you were a practitioner engaging with this situation, have a conversation with each other about how you would engage with it. How do you interpret it? How do you read that situation? Have a little start, and then I'll come in and walk around and. In groups, yeah, in groups. This was part of a research project where we're concerned with the improvement of river catchment qualities in the European Union. So this is a particular water catchment taken at a historical moment in about 2003 or 4. You can see, well, I'll give you one clue. One interpretive thing that you can see in that is that it must be winter. There's no leaves on the trees. What else do you see? Perhaps we should do it collectively all together. Yes, okay, very managed land.
Maybe many properties, many different owners there.
That could be historical division of land is a big issue.
Land can be different, yeah. So every piece of land can be just managed now in a different way.
Yeah. Okay.
There's also like so there's also a pond in between. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry?
There's a pond in between that stores water.
Yeah, there's a dam holding water.
Yeah, it's a reservoir. I'm sure the person holding that reservoir would have a lot of iodine.
Yeah, okay, good. What? Yes, it looks fertile.
This side, that side, not sure. That side looks fairly bad.
Yeah, okay.
The more it gets hilly.
And what about the direction and type of ploughing? the direction and type of ploughing. So the lines of the tractor pulling the plough have gone down the hill.
Yeah, in different directions.
Well, different directions, but well, yes, this is the so.
It could be just the way the photos are taken.
I took the photos.
Context.
Well, exactly. This is why we're trying to tease out the context, what this context might be.
He says there's an issue. What is the issue?
Yeah.
Is there an issue?
How would you go about trying to sort out the issue? That's the question. How would you?
You'd ask the question. You know, what is it that you're showing us?
I'm showing you an image that many people would interpret as a beautiful landscape, a beautiful agricultural landscape.
There isn't a lot of differences between things. It's like, it seems like the same land, same fertility. So what is the issue?
Okay, yes, okay. Well, I know things that you don't know, so I'm going to...
Is soil erosion an issue?
Yes, soil erosion has become an issue there.
Yeah, because lack of trees and the rolling plains kind of attachment
Yep.
could result in a runoff of the soil.
Yeah, and nobody's engaged in any step work.
I mean, in many circles, to show this slide would evoke a response of, oh, that's a beautiful landscape. And why am...
It is, but there's a reason you've written issue. The
Yeah,
issues
yeah.
in the slide.
I know.
So now we're focused on issues. And
So
not
I'm asking you how you might go about it if you were an inquirer. How would you get beyond the image that could be part of your history of seeing this as a beautiful landscape?
Yeah, but not that beautiful because we don't have enough integration. Because in terms of the hydrology we need to solve or we need in the situation about water management, we are having more runoff, superficial water, and no integration. So we are having a problem for catching water for the downstream sites.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, everyone, I think, is quite rightly saying you would not accept it as face value and you would engage in some deeper inquiry into what was happening there. And if you engaged in that deeper inquiry, what you would come to perhaps appreciate is that erosion is a problem, particularly as they've changed the cropping system, the sequence of crops, and the way of ploughing to prepare for those crops, and that the water is inclined to run down the plough lines rather than across the contours. The whole valley grows many more crops than it did historically. There used to be much more grazing and permanent pasture with animals grazing, which reduced soil erosion. If you went to where the river runs into the Adriatic Sea and you pulled up the data for both the sea and the river and the groundwater that sits under this landscape, you would find excess nitrates coming from the fertilizers which have been applied to this new cropping system, which means that the groundwater under this landscape is no longer safe to drink. How have they overcome that? A water company was given the rights by the province, the Marche regional government, to deliver fresh water from the Apennine mountain range, Italy's equivalent of the Himalayas, to pipe water down to communities where they have to pay for it. So water gets privatised and local people can no longer use their wells because they're too heavy with nitrate coming from the farming that they have been doing. The river and the Adriatic Sea has major algal blooms because of the nitrate and the phosphorus that's coming from these farming systems. Now, you could ask the question, where are the people in this particular image and who are the people? So if you think of my metaphor of walking on the landscape, who are the people walking on the landscape, and what are the shoes that they've been wearing? Why are they doing what they do? You inquire further and you find out in the regional government of Serra de Conte, of the Marche, there are different communes. You have, I think, panchayats here in India as the local level of government. In Italy, it's the commune. They have a mix of communes in this region, including communes that have been historically communist for 50 years or more. And the practices in these different communes vary, depending on the histories of the communes. So this was all part of this project. And like many in the water sector, I've started with an image of the biophysical world. And historically, water and its governance, or water and its concerns, have been driven by hydrologists and to some extent ecologists, and seeing water catchments as only biological or ecological systems, which are not insignificant framings, but they constrain what it is that we do. In hydrology, hydrology is driven on a commitment to a lot of modelling, and a lot of modelling today is constrained by the awareness that in a climate change world, historical data is no longer going to be extremely helpful or extremely valid, because we're going to be confronted by ongoing surprise and uncertainty. And it makes sense perhaps to shift the boundaries of your framing from, say, a biophysical system to a human activity system. If you introduce humans and you go here, you introduce other things of characterising this catchment. But in the work we did, we framed the catchment in these terms. These are related to the work done by systems scholars like Donald Schoen and Rittel and Weber, who coined the term wicked problems. So this was for us a situation characterised by interdependencies, complexity, uncertainty, controversy, and multiple stakeholding and perspectives. So to do something about that situation involved a process which we were researching called social learning, which is about how people can come together and work towards concerted action to transform their understandings, their practices, their social relationships, and their situation. And that, to me, is the outcome of a systemic co-inquiry, which in a small, very small way, you've started here today. It's to take a situation you don't know much about, to work together to put yourself in it, and to collaborate in such a way that you may be able to say that I understand you. Okay, I think we're out of time, so unless I failed to mention one thing, actually, that the landscape image I just showed you was primarily a determinant of the European Union's Common Agricultural Policy. And that was the key driver of what farmers were doing in that landscape to maintain a viable living. They changed their whole farming system because of the money given for certain types of crops, and those choices had systemic consequences which people who developed the policy here had no idea about or had no way of being concerned about. And that was what triggered the whole change in the mix of farming practices and crops and everything that were going on there. So if there are policy choices and you have to deal with it, and we should not be seduced just by the image of a beautiful landscape. Okay. Thank you very much. Pavel is going to talk next. There's a short break, I think.
Yes, we take a 5 minutes break. This is, he does it for the full day, just in an hour's time. So it's just the initiation and introduction to systems thinking, which I take as relational. So, and then you can see the relationality. The last slide was showing the depth of relations that exist. And this may be at the surface, the relations could be far, far richer and deeper. But let's take a 5 minutes bio break.
So my name is Pavel Senkel. I come from Arizona in the US at a university called Prescott College. And at my second slide, I show a little bit about what it looks like there, so you have a sense of where I'm coming from. Because, you know, Dr. Ray was talking about sort of positionality, really, and sort of how we're situated in places. I want to tell you how I'm situated in my places. But the first slide here just overviews a little bit of what I'll be talking about. So I have maybe 6 or 7 slides, and then a longer interactive workshop to engage in. So, you know, be prepared for that and be prepared for talking out with the rest of the group. So I'm particularly going to pick on the table in the back because that's where I was sitting before, and they were giving me a hard time. So if you give me a hard time, I'll pick on you more. And that goes for Gary particularly. So we're going to be talking about what it says, really, from systems thinking to regenerative frameworks. So my work, although I'm not at all a systems scientist, I don't think, you know, Dr. Omar called me that in the introduction, I don't think I've ever been called a scientist before in my life. My background is in environmental humanities and philosophy, so I come at systems thinking from a more humanist and philosophical perspective. So if you're working in the humanities or in social sciences, you know, perhaps we have to talk about that if you're coming from economics or management, but I think this is a place to bridge those things. So, what's the relationship between systems thinking and regenerative practice and metastability, which is a kind of a new term that I've been exploring for the last year or so, to really think about, I think a lot of the points that Dr. Ray was bringing for us are about, you know, letting go of expectations, letting go of assumptions in our research, and creating space for things to emerge organically. So I come from a university which is relatively small, about 1,000 students, a little bit less, and everything we do is at the intersection of ecology, ecological systems, and community through experience. Everything, from undergraduate through to PhD. So when I talk about regeneration, regenerative learning, it's really thinking about it in that context, how we use ecological models as ways to, you know, think about economics or to think about systems design, to think about the way that communities work together and organizations are structured. So, but a little bit, there we are. You know, because we're faced with some of everybody knows what sort of crises we're in. And if you're here during the conference, I'll talk at length about some of the crises that we're in. But I mean, effectively, here's just a snapshot. You know, social fragmentation, ecological disruptions, or an epistemological crisis of all sorts. And I think we're seeing this head on with, you know, changes in politics around the world, changes in relationships between among communities, and some of the challenges that faces. Climate change as another one. People have given it new names, a polycrisis or metacrisis. We're running out of ways to describe what a difficult time we're in. So I think part of the reason we're having this conference and having this session here is to think about, can we, through our research as experts, everybody here is an expert in their field, can we, through our research, help to make some changes to those crises? Helps to engage in those so that we can actually rebuild, regenerate, recreate some relationships with the more than human world, the natural world, and with ourselves. So this is some of where I am. So I'm not going to show you a picture, I think it was the Italian countryside, but I'll show you a picture. All of these pictures are taken about 15 minutes from my home in Arizona. So to give you a sense, it is a land also of contrasts. You know, we are at about 1,500 meters above. So who has been to Phoenix? Has anybody here been to Phoenix? Yeah, that's usually the one place that somebody goes because there's a big airport there and it's extremely hot. In the summer, it's about 42, 45 degrees, which may not be hot from Indian standards, but it's still pretty hot. But where I live, it doesn't really get above 30, 35. And in fact, you'll see on one of these slides, there's snow, cactus next to the snow. And you know, you see two pictures of water. The one on the right there is on our campus at the university. And that stream, a creek it's called, runs probably for about 2 days after the rain. And then it's completely dry. But it's not completely dry because the water continues underground. And that's why we're able to have all of the trees that grow up there. Whereas that picture on the left is probably about 4 kilometers from that. And it gives you a sense of it is the high desert. So when it rains, all the rain goes down into the lakes, that lake down at the bottom. Arizona is famous for having one natural lake. All of the other lakes are reservoirs that are dammed up. And you may know famously that the Colorado River really ends at the border with Mexico because all of the water is taken out of it by the United States, and they don't want any of that water to continue into Mexico. So, you know, there's a lot of water. Water is a huge issue, a different issue than it might be in the picture that I showed earlier, a different issue than it might be here in Orissa, but it's still a very big issue. So when I left, we had finally some rain. We have our own monsoon, although people laugh here when I say we have a monsoon, but it rained for 3 months out of the year, and it has not rained. And so we finally, just before I left on this trip, had 3 or 4 inches of rain, which is about half of what we need for the year. So all of those things, to think, just pause on this for a minute, because we all talked about we're going to use water as this foundational issue for us to think about. And even if you're not an expert, if you're not familiar with the southwest of the United States, that doesn't matter. When you think of water, I think we saw it in the slide in the last session, that each of these, I think going back to the river, or the stream, it's about this big, it's not very big, that every piece of water has cultural dimensions, has economic dimensions, has all sorts of socio-ecological dimensions. The reason that the town is there is because the river exists. But many more people come to live there because the river exists than can be fed and supported by the river. So then we have to take water from somewhere else. We take it from the Colorado, which then does not flow into Mexico, and farmers downstream don't have enough water for their fields. So it all becomes a fairly complicated and really expensive problem for us in the Southwest. More people want to move there because the sun shines 300 days of the year, but there's no water. So what do we do with that? And I just moved there, so I'm part of the problem. Because it's sunny 300 days of the year. So what are we going to talk about? Another couple of images here. I wanted to stick with the water theme. But what are some characteristics of regenerative thinking? Is that a term that, who has heard of regenerative thinking before, or regeneration before? So I know some of these topics are relatively new to people. So what words come to your mind? I mean, there's some on the screen which you can repeat back, but what comes to your mind when I use the word regeneration? Energy? Energy. All right, you know what? I'm going to put some of these words up here. You can shift your focus just slightly this way. So, regeneration. All right, and you said natural resources. Potential, okay. We'll come back to some of these. All right, anything else? Revival. Mm-hmm. Yes. I heard inter something.
Opposite of degeneration.
So, hold on, I want to go to the interconnected. Yep. Circular economic. Yep. Long-term duration, okay. And then there was someone back there too that I want to.
Sounds obvious, but opposite of degeneration.
Opposite of degeneration. Yeah. And some revitalization. Yeah, put that with revival. No. I'll put it up here, but I'll put it up here in a different color. Why am I putting it up here in a different color? Gary. Sorry? Flourishing. Let me put sustainability here first. One of my favorite words, because we're working toward flourishing, away from degeneration. Okay, like the creek in the picture. Any other words? Evolving, I like that. Ecological function. Okay, maybe a couple more words because I'm too tall to reach too low. Complexity, yes. Okay, one more word, yes? Cycles. Excellent.
Healthy.
Sorry?
Healthy.
Healthy. All right, that'll be enough for now, I think. But we'll keep this parent list I put up on the board. Does anybody wonder why I put sustainability in a different color?
Because it's in a lower level of what we want with regenerativeness.
Okay, it's at a lower level, you suggested.
Because it's like a normative mission of maintaining the systems, but regenerate acts as, to evolving the system.
Yes, I think that's really well said. That when I talk about sustainability, and I know we talk about it a lot, and it's, sorry? Baseline, yes. It's a fine term to use.
Sustainability, I guess, is the route to regeneration.
It can be the route to regeneration, absolutely. One question that I always ask when people talk about sustainability is, what are you sustaining? Right? Are you sustaining something that's already unsustainable? In which case, how do we replenish or regenerate to rebuild our relationship with ourselves and with the more than human world? So I use more than human as natural. Gary, you were going to say?
I was just going to reinforce what you actually said. So what we're doing is not sustainable.
No, exactly. Exactly. So sustainability is not a goal. Sustainability is down here. It's something we step up on to be where we want to be, right? So that's why, we could talk about SDGs for a while too, and some of the challenges that the Sustainable Development Goals pose. But I think it's an important step, because if I had said it before, who has heard of the term sustainability? Everybody's hand goes up, right? But who has heard of the term regeneration? Maybe 3 or 4 hands went up. Now everybody has heard of that. So now let's explore what that means for you and your work. So another couple of pictures of Arizona. These are, we live about 2 hours from the Grand Canyon, which probably most people have heard about and seen pictures of. And I wanted to use one other example there. And I'm not going to repeat, there's a lot of text on these slides, so if you wanted to take a picture, or if we can provide the slides afterwards as well. I'm not going to read all of the things on there, but this bottom picture, it's kind of hard to see, but there's stuff growing here, right? Stuff growing right by the river. And the only reason that grows there in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and it didn't used to, because there's a great big dam at the top of the Grand Canyon. So the water consistent flow throughout the whole canyon. It goes up and down a little bit, but it used to have these great big floods. Every time it rained or when the snow melted, the Grand Canyon would flood really, really high, and it would wash away everything that was growing on the sides. So now what has happened is, because humans made the dam and created the river flow more consistently, it's more vibrant, it's more green, more things are growing, it's more sort of ecologically diverse. And in fact, the river has brought down species which are not meant to be there, so invasive species, which means that there's invasive birds that might come down and nest in the Grand Canyon because of what we've done. So now it becomes a much more complex thing. Like, do you want to get rid of the dam? Because then you would destroy this habitat for these new animals. So think about the complexities involved. We've already messed it up, right? Anything we do is just going to mess it up more. So how do we engage in this messed up system to try to regenerate what we can? So, what does it actually mean? And I'm going to step here so I can look at these just a little bit. So what does it actually mean when we are sort of participating within a living system? And I'm going to keep coming back to that. I think the first presentation set up the stage for thinking about ourselves as part of a bigger system. And I'm adding to that by saying that we really desperately need to be thinking about ecology within that system. And how do we do that as researchers? So how do you engage more sort of embodied practice or sensing? How do you engage with that on a sort of more holistic level? How do you adapt your research response? Rather than coming up with I think that I'm picking on that last table again, rather than come up with a presupposition that this is the outcome that you're going to achieve, begin with the questions and leave yourself open to emergent possibilities. We shouldn't know the answer before we begin. Yes?
I hope I'm not disturbing.
No, please.
Why are we calling it network agency? What is the role of the word agency here?
That's a great point. You should come to my longer talk, for one, because that's what the whole paper is about. But to say that to give agency to the relationship in the network. So I think that goes back again to the previous talk. If you think about a network map that has the nodes and the relationships and the lines, that what's important in this type of research, regenerative systems, is the relationality, the relationship, and we want to give the relationship the power, not the dots.
I'm also seeing many semantic similarities between regeneration, generative practices, network, agency, and artificial intelligence.
Yes, absolutely. And I'd love to talk more about that as well. Yeah. And the problems with it. Right. So this is a diagram that I've been using quite frequently. And I think this is a useful schematic to use when you're thinking about inquiry, when you're thinking about process. So the diagram itself, it's not an infinity symbol. Does anyone recognize what this symbol is? Panarchy. Yeah. My goodness, it's rare that I'm in a group where somebody knows what that is. So thank you, absolutely. So panarchy or the adaptive ecological cycle. Panarchy has many of these, nested in one another. But what I like about this, and I've changed the words, but effectively, if you think about your own work and your own engagement in any sort of practice, that it's never on a constant uphill, and this is what we're told it should be, sort of this constant uphill towards some sort of goal, right? So we find ourselves, it doesn't matter where you start. You can start here, you can start, I'm cultivating this idea. So I'm cultivating this idea, I'm going to cultivate it until it's flourishing, and we heard that word already. It's flourishing and thriving, I've got this wonderful idea, but then, naturally, like an ecosystem, that idea is that flourishing is going to ebb, right? So your idea will run its course. Or if you think about an ecosystem, you can't grow anymore, or the climate is pushing you to do something else. And so, in various versions, that's called a collapse. And then you have to reimagine. So use that as an opportunity, like, oh my goodness, this research that I've been doing for 6 months, these interviews, they're not for anything at all. I need to scrap my whole project. No, it's an opportunity to reimagine because something grows out of that. Right? And then how do you co-create with communities, with your partners, with your advisors, with the natural world, even more importantly, than to cultivate again. So it's this continual cycle that you can see manifested. I'd list a few types of sort of mixed methods and participatory approaches to research that some of you might be engaged with, whether it's bioethnography or you notice these bridging pieces, right? Systems mapping. So we did a little bit of that in the earlier session. Design inquiry, and somebody actually mentioned that this is a lot like design thinking, because really what we are doing is designing this methodology. Bioregional modeling, so thinking about how you think about place from multi different perspectives. participatory action research. I think a number of you have mentioned that. And reflective practice. So thinking, and this is just a small sampling of types of research methods that can be employed within the context of regenerative research design. And we'll do a little bit of that. So the main takeaways are that this is adaptive, it's capable of reorganizing, and it saves space for emergence. So all of those things. Yes? I'm sorry? Metastability. So, I didn't define that, did I? So metastability, yes? Oh, can't hear you.
Is that working now? Yeah, that's definitely working now. Yes, it's a great collection of methods, and of course there are lots of others. I'm just wondering, Pavel, if you've mapped those different methods onto the overall framework of Panarchy. Have you aligned them with those different phases and their utility in those phases?
Not exhaustively, right? But I think it's sort of in specific instances, absolutely. You can map those out. Like sit down with a specific group and say, how do you work through these different phases in this process? I've got different tailored versions of this. But as a generic, I think this process can actually overlay over organizational design. It can overlay over many different things.
Yeah, I'm just very, very interested in how all of these come together as an overall system, which we can communicate outside of our little niche of people and organizations, because this kind of stuff has to really get out there in general practice everywhere.
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
thanks.
I think we need all of you to help us do this, right? So in some ways, you've just tipped our hand a bit, that we've invited all of you to understand these systems of practice, to be able to have these conversations and really help spread the word, because I think these research methods are absolutely essential. So, continuing onwards, I think oh, metastability, sorry. Yeah, I was just you caught me. I was going to try not to define that. So, all right, well, let me do what I often do. Who here knows what metastability means? Yeah.
Stabilization or stability? Like how do you understand what makes it stable? That would be my understanding.
Sort of, yeah. And I'll tell this anecdote when I'm giving my talk later, so pretend you don't hear this if you're going to be here for that talk. But I was visiting with a friend of mine who works at the University of the Arctic in Svalbard, north of Norway. So, about 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole, the northernmost city you can go to, and there's a university there. I was sitting in his office, and he passed away recently, but he was studying the relationships between glaciers, climate change, reindeer, and the dwarf birch, the trees that grow up in the Arctic, and looking at that as a systems model. And he first explained to me the idea of multiple stable states in an ecosystem. That there isn't just one point of stability that everything always moves toward, right? So, for example, if reindeer find vegetation to eat in one valley, and then suddenly it becomes colder there, or it rains and it freezes, they move to the other valley, and then they eat the vegetation there, right? And they are very attuned to global climate change because they actually move where they feed based on what the glaciers are doing and how much vegetation is exposed. So that introduced me to this idea that there is more than one stability. And we need to open ourselves up. So metastability is actually the state of possible stability options. That there is not just one place, but you think about a marble on a curved surface, and it can fall in many different places. And some are deeper and some are more shallow, but it's okay to have multiple stability states. So for me, it breaks the fiction of there's just one thing. There's one stability that we need to move toward, and otherwise we ignore everything. Because here we can say our research needs to stay in this place where maybe the outcomes aren't exactly what we want, but it's going to lead us to this next thing. So it's similar to making space for emergence. Does that answer the question? Yes? Okay. All right, so let me just check ahead here. Okay, I have 2 more slides after this, and then I will let you loose to answer some questions here. So here I just wanted to outline, the holistic impacts. And I think to your point, Gary, and this is a question that often comes up that I personally need help with in higher education where I am as a dean. We are being assessed for certain things as a university, as you are here in India. And I don't think those things are the right things. Right? So we're being assessed, for example, on how much our graduates earn in a salary when they graduate, and that's it. So not their social responsibility, not their ecological impact, not how they work together in community, none of that, only how much they earn. And I think that's the opposite, probably tell, of regenerative thinking. So how do we, as a community of experts, create an assessment and create outcomes that are actually attuned to the work that we're doing so that this work is valued outside of the academia? I think that is one of the key questions. So I'm glad we have people from industry here as well, because that needs to be in practice too. So I just pulled out some of the SDGs that regenerative thinking and regenerative frameworks relates to. And I think that my favorite SDG is 17, about partnership working and collaboration and working together. So the Sustainable Development Goals. But I think you can begin to see how it's actually through that collaboration that you can better address all of the other 16 SDGs. So that should really be the entry. It should be number 1, not 17. That's what I think. And I think ultimately at the bottom, if ecology is the foundation of regenerative thinking, everything we do needs to ask the question, how does our research serve life? And that, for a lot of people, that's a profound question. Because you might not have thought about how this work that I'm doing in in social science or in economics or in history or whatever discipline, how it serves life. And for me, that's an essential question. If we don't start with that, then I think we've already failed. So, this is my summary before we get to, this is the last slide before we get to some questions. So really, just to summarize, that, I'd quite like this. Regenerative research is not a methodology. That's a little small to read, so I'm going to read it. It's a worldly orientation. So it's actually a paradigm shift of how you're thinking about your engagement with the world. It's not just, I'm going to take this off the shelf and I'm going to do this. It's like, no, you're going to take this, you're going to stand on it, and you're going to do everything else. So it's transdisciplinary, so interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, embodied, that we engage with it on a sort of human participatory level and participatory. So we're fully engaged in these processes. They are not objective. I think to raise first, talked about that quite a bit. The objectivity is a fallacy. But if we're part of the research paradigm, then it's always going to be subjective. So transdisciplinary, embodied, and participatory. And I think we have quite a bit of time, actually. We have about half an hour. I'd like us to work in the groups that you're in, or if you're unhappy with your group, then you can move groups. I think that's fine too. But what I'd like you to do is there are 4 main parts of this. So systems and stakes, regenerative intention, metastable tensions, and emergent design moves. So really break that into a couple of different parts. So really the idea, you've already sort of introduced yourselves, you kind of know some of the research areas that you're working with. So I'd ask, what system am I working in? And from Dr. A's talk, do you see yourself in this system? And how do you see yourself? And what's at stake in this system? So if you're in the system but nature is not, I want you to put nature in. So where is it? If it's outside, why is it outside? Why is it not connected? So human communities more than human nature. And then what could my project help to regenerate? So whatever it is that you're doing, it doesn't matter. What could it help to rebuild, to regenerate, to revitalize? You can look at that list of words on the side there too, because it should. So I can say things like that. Your research should do this. I'm not your advisor, so I might get into trouble. So, and then what are the tensions, right? What are the tensions or contradictions? Like maybe actually you can't find an answer to this. Not finding an answer to this is the answer to this. And then you go back and say, all right, I need help, group. This is where the co-creative, collaboratory piece, I want you all to help each other answer these questions. This is not, you answer it yourself and then you share with the group and say, I have trouble with this. I don't know what's at stake. And somebody say, you forgot this. You forgot that this has an impact on water usage, or this has an impact on communities. And then where could you shift? How could you change that? And then down here, so this is the part I'm going to ask us all to come back and share, at least one person per table. We'll have time for that. What one or two design choices could you make that invite emergence, right? And prepare to share with the group. So some examples of that are you could co-design with participants. You could have multiple iterative cycles of data collection and reflection. You could have multiple methods that allow for unexpected emergent properties, and then open-ended questions. So those are sort of some basic research methods that you might employ. But what might be a more regenerative addition from what you've learned this morning so far? What could you add to your research? All right, so those four main parts. So really, what are you working on? How could your project help regenerate something? Where are the tensions? And then what changes might you make? Does that make sense? Okay. And I'll keep time. I'll say when we want to move from one to the next. Probably about 10 minutes each or so. So go ahead and get started. Whoa, I'm going to interrupt. Sorry about that. Don't have to hold that quite that close. Going to interrupt just briefly, just to remind you that you should be moving through these questions. So if you're stuck on number 1, please move to number 2. What could my project help to regenerate? If you're already done with everything, then you're not, and you need to go back. So. Okay, you have 10 more minutes in this activity, so you should be moving on to questions 3 and 4. And as a reminder, you'll be asked to share your answer to question 4. Okay, you have 5 minutes left. 5 minutes left. 5 minutes left. So you should be on the last one. Okay. But I think it's that time. Sorry. We could spend a lot more time, but I understand there's also lunch to be had eventually, and you might want to go home and see your families or things. So we can't stay here forever. But hopefully you'll come back again for the rest of the week, and we can continue this conversation. And we actually have time after lunch, and I think Professor Amar will explain that later. But for longer discussion and some Q&A as well. So what I'd like now is, if you are ready, or even if you're not ready, if somebody from each table would try to address the question number 4, right? So what 1 or 2 design choices, Gary, have you made that might invite emergence? So this is something that you might do that's not already in your research plan, not something that you've thought of before that has kind of emerged out of the conversation today, or something, I think I was thinking about this, but now I'm going to add it for sure. So just be curious, and everybody else can listen, because I think these might resonate. This is part of that sort of transdisciplinary work that we do, is even if people in different disciplines, you learn very much from one another. The methodologies transfer from one to the next. So we'll just pick a table at random. How about this table here? And do we have a microphone for them? Great.
Approaching a case in Mexico about bringing a river alive again. And we are using the social technical systems framework, the transformative innovation framework, and the complex adaptation systems too.
Okay, those are things that you're going to add as, so thinking about what additional design choices can you make in those are new.
Yeah, that's how we are approaching the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Yeah.
And this is for a specific
case
project
in Mexico.
In Mexico.
Rural systems.
Okay, great. So you want to summarize those again, just for the group?
Yeah. Socio-technical systems as a framework, transformative innovation, and complex adaptation systems.
Complex adaptation. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Hopefully that noise won't continue. But all right. Which table would like to go next? That table? Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Right there. Yes, please.
So we discussed an educational institution had different stakeholders like faculty, students, and management, and how to balance the interest or a conflicting interest of these stakeholders. For regenerative intention, we discussed how the academic interest of the students can be maintained, considering different stakeholders have their own priorities and interests. And for the metastable tensions, is actually how these different conflicting interests can be better managed, so that different stakeholders feel satisfied or happy that they are also getting their say. And finally, the emergent design moves, we propose that we can have focus group discussions and debates to understand the different viewpoints and ideas, and maybe we can visualize the debates, develop a certain visualization of how these interests can be, although they are interdependent or sometimes conflicting, how they can be better managed. Some visual mechanism can be developed so that better policy making can be done, or we can implement those ideas so that all the different stakeholders are happy and something like that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try something here. Hearing that from this group, what do you think you might add from your context to that? Just what was missing? Because I feel like there's just some piece that we've discussed that I wonder if it would enrich the research that yours focused on more.
Complex adaptation?
Complex adaptation with natural systems, right? Yeah, so social technical systems. So I would think about, all of that is excellent and fine, and the focus groups I think is great. What role does ecology play? Do ecosystems play? Does place play in those relationships? And what impact does your outcome have on the place, right?
Yes, we discussed certain things are controllable and certain things are not in our control.
So one mic can work.
Okay.
So again, we talked about things we can control, like people in our institution, we are able to control our students, our faculty and management. And there are factors beyond our control, like the fee structure of an institution, the socioeconomic background of the students. So I think we sometimes need to figure out how we can balance these internal and external factors so as to arrive at our desired objectives and goals.
In our case, we are 3 team members. We haven't picked up a particular niche as such, but we actually try to explore individually what each of us actually do in our research. So for that, I would like to thank you first for actually connecting our individual selves and combining it to our research that we do. So we have actually looked into 3 different dimensions. For example, Mr. Samal. So he is actually working on how can we implement CSR and ESG on rural development. And ma'am, Ms. Jamir, so she is actually looking at the tribal women who are neglected and how they are neglected and what can be done in that sense. And I specifically work on a corporate angle, wherein I look at how the compensation is paid to the top level management and how corporates can work in. So this is our first part. So in point number 2, we were actually looking at what is the thing that is missing, like what can we regenerate. So we found out that, as sir was telling, so we were in Delhi and Mumbai, and we were looking at the air quality index also and how it is going up and how the pollution is happening. So we are looking at what checks or regulations can we bring in more. So why are people not concerned? Like even if they are staying in the metro cities, why are they not concerned about the air quality index? We all talk about it, but what do we do it ultimately? So that's our second point. And regarding the tribal women thing, we've found out that we need to regenerate in terms of, for example, when there is a rehabilitation happening, when there is a town planning happening. So how is the social life affected, and what are the steps that can be taken in that direction? And from my side, I feel that why is the compensation to the top level management or the CEOs only tied to the financial part? What are the non-financial things that a company can do? So that is our second point. And third one is the tensions or contradictions that we are seeing. We feel that there are 3 or 4 lacunas in our system. So first one is, for me, it is the mindset and awareness that is being lacking. So if we have a change in mindset, if we shift the mindset, then we can actually go a long way. And sir also pointed out that there isn't a personal touch. So unless and until something wrong happens to us, for example, the people who are affected by pollution, so people who lose lives, a woman who is actually losing a child because of pollution is more concerned and more empathetic. And unless it happens to his or her own family or personally, we are not concerned much. So there's a personal angle to it also. And ma'am was also pointing out that especially with respect to the northeastern states, the government schemes actually play a major role, and how corruption actually acts as a hindrance when we are looking at the implementation of those schemes. So finally, the final part, which is the design. I'm sorry, I'm just taking a lot of time. So design, we looked at 3 different angles. So we say that there are 3 major parts in any country, so which plays a major role. So one is the government side, which man was looking at, and one is the community side, and one is the corporate side. So how we all 3 can get together to actually design something really, really effective. So these are the 3 angles which we looked at, and we are, like, as a group also, we are really thankful that you actually, it was very interesting when we came out with this diagram, a collaborative diagram, which we thought of initially that we are going nowhere. So we are very individual, we are going nowhere, and we could ultimately actually combine. So I think that is what your target was, and you are being successful. Thank you. You're not nervous.
No, I was kidding about that. No, I think that's a brilliant example of looking at relationality and looking at systems, that across disciplines you can actually learn quite a bit from one another. And I think that was the case in all of the groups thus far. We're not going to skip Tina's group, though, here. So.
There you are. I'll talk about mine. Yeah, though we also discussed in similar way the 3 topics, but I would like to highlight, then he will talk about his topic. So basically, the discussion we had was spiritual intelligence and the life satisfaction among the rural youth. So the problem, this is again a rural systems that we talked about, but what are the second things, the barriers that we still face even today
is basically the social economic status, and then the digital divide, and then the infrastructure unavailability, and multiple challenges still the rural youth faces the problems. And what we have also done a pre-study was, we have seen in the urban studies where the spiritual intelligence increases, then the life satisfaction increases. But in the rural youth, it is completely, spiritual intelligence increases, but the life satisfaction is completely not, because I am not even happy with my own infrastructure, digital divide, and then there are so many tensions. How will I be satisfied? That's what the rural youth says. So therefore, so what is the models that we would like to see? So it is all in a higher education, what we would like to have an integrative model, which has the A, B, C, D model that I would like to talk about: academic performance, and then the best health, community connectedness, and then the development supportive environment, and then the economic stability by giving the, there are so many factors. Each one are regenerative because one has got a ripple effect on the other. They are interconnected. So therefore, holistically, we would like the policy makers to integrate that model in the higher education so that they also flourish, and then the community, and then the state or the national level, they all progress. That's what we would like to highlight. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like that too. I think there's a reason that there's an author called Zach Stein who's talked about the meta-crisis of education. And because education is the foundation of all of these crises, and we continue to simply reinscribe our same belief systems over and over again through education, same paradigm, so we need to break that paradigm. So absolutely.
All the three of us are from different disciplines, but we discussed urban systems at large. So when we think about urban, there are stakes, obviously, a lot of stakeholders in there. We have the residents, the people, along with that we have government authorities. At the same time, we also have living entities that are not participating in the city system directly. So like non-living living entities like the animals, the birds, and ecosystem at large in the cities that we often happen to forget. So the regenerative intention for urban systems could be to improve relationship among all these stakeholders, that when we think about developing an urban system, that we always have an emphasis over economy and growth, and how businesses, corporates drive that growth in the cities, and we never look at it from a people's perspective, that we also never look at it from an ecological perspective, that it has been a crisis that we are now discussing a lot about the stray dog problem, stray dog menace that's happening in our cities right now. We have a sudden pigeon crisis that's happening in India across multiple cities. So these are systemic problems that cities have, and we have never happened to look and gauge at these problems from that particular angle. So that's the regenerative intention is obviously to improve the relationships and think how we could find a solution. So the gauge is important. At the same time, it's also to promote awareness. So a lot of people do not happen to also understand the idea, the knowledge and the awareness that's lacking with a lot of them. So, and to bring it to practice, to promote these awareness, promote the knowledge systems, and bring that to practice. Along with it, so the third was the tensions. So the tensions, as I mentioned, there's always a conflict between the authorities and the governments. Ma'am elaborated at how as to we have high-rise buildings where we are not supposed to. There are urban informalities like slum dwellers who are restricted to one part of the cities, and we have all these parallels happening at the same time. So the emergent design moves is to have a collaborative approach and bring all these systems together and see how we can all work in a synergy, and there has to be coherence of all these individual communities and systems can work together in one large overarching system in the urban cities.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I think you've demonstrated one, it sounds simple, but it's actually quite complex to stop thinking about there's a social system and an ecological system, but there is one socio-ecological system. And just that lens, in and of itself, is the foundation of what you just talked about, and that's key.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So we actually, we worked at very individual level at the very beginning, and then I think we started collaborating, and we came up to a point where 4 of us, we have certain interests. So my interest is in the area of women's agency. So at the system level, I put financial and social resource constraint and how women's agency work at that level. She worked at ecology system, ma'am worked at adult education, and sir worked at doctor shortage in rural hospitals, so basically medical facility. And then the regenerative intention in case of women's agency was the relationship, at the relationship level, whether the constraints or the institutions that work at that level help or impact the women's agency, and how institutions have a role to play there. Ma'am worked, she wanted to say that whether the impact of AI and AI accommodative curriculum assessment pedagogy post-COVID era in adult education, especially in MBA colleges. Am I right, ma'am? Yeah. So, and at the health level, maybe there should be more medical institutions, regular appointment of doctors, and as he was also speaking that at many rural hospitals, there is less availability of doctors, and doctors don't want to go there basically, because of, again, the resource and social constraints that are there. So the threshold and the tension in our research area. So in my case, as I was talking about institutions, so marginalized women specifically, how do they face these institutional norms, and how do they deal with their agentic moves? So it's quite different when it comes to women at non-marginalized level, or the cream of the layer, and the marginalized women. And at the adult education level, there are a lot of resistance when it comes to acceptance of AI, I would say. So how these systems are changing, whether they're paced or spaced, or do I start from in-class or in-office change? So the point of change, what it should be. In case of health practices, okay, is there any, the problem is again that same appointment, both human and sometimes natural constraints are there that he mentioned. And when it came to the emergent design move, she came up with one thing, it's called sustainable business model, where we can probably provide women, this marginalized women with emphasis on the self-help groups, and provide them with more resources, so that they can they can make more agentic moves. And in case of adult education, the design choices would be adult education and ecosystem for accommodation and change, multiple stakeholders, and how are all our systems working at macro, micro, and meso level, and regenerativeness from self-generativeness. So, and in case of health, I think sir wrote that there should be more doctors' appointment, government intervention should be there. So that's how it should work.
So thank you, and I think we can see here actually they're actually pretty integrated when you start to think about the regenerative framework, that the projects might seem different, but they actually have a lot in common. So yeah. Yeah, the constraints. Yeah. 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 Thank you. Okay, this group.
Hello, I hope I'm audible. A very good afternoon to everyone. So we have a very diverse background, but we decided to settle on the topic of energy transition. Okay,
So simply speaking, energy transition is the shift from fossil fuel-based economy to a renewable-based economy, as we know, solar energy, wind energy, and all that. So that is my area of research. So what is at stake here, or who is at stake here? It is economies around the globe, the people, and as well as the environment, as we know. And the regenerative intent would be balancing energy generation with energy consumption, having some sort of a system that restricts the energy usage, or some sort of a threshold of energy usage and generation and consumption that does not affect the environment and people as it does. Then coming to the metastable tension, first would be a technological pushback. Some people are wary of using renewables than what they are used to. Then there are economic systems and trade relations that are in place since time immemorial, which are not so readily changed. And third would be, as Sir suggested, concentration of wealth, which actually provides the wealth that provides the freedom of choice is not available to the masses. It is very concentrated, as well as the control of the system is very concentrated. So that is one major metastable tension that is there. And lastly, for the emergent design group, there is this one concept of circular economy, which can be implemented within an economy as well as across economies, so that in order to ensure a more sustainable energy transition for that. So that was our whole discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. There are a lot of complexities within that, but I love the approach that it sort of integrated all of the different projects together. So thank you. All right, over to this group. Who would like to?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Shishir. So we settled on examining concern around, well, how does the, in aggregate terms, aggregate digital data, can that be used for a public good rather than as what we see all over the world? At a planetary scale, we see that it's all being used for either surveillance, or political surveillance, or perhaps you could call it commercial surveillance. So is there a possibility, and this is not unprecedented, it's being tried in other parts of the world. So the question is really, what do we do with enormous amounts of data being collected 24/7 by billions of us all over the world, and can that at the aggregate level, not individual, aggregate level, for instance, say, simple example would be traffic flows. So I'm from Mumbai, we have congestion in all our cities. Can traffic flow be improved because we know how people are moving through cities? So that's the challenge, the question that we're after. The heart of this, one of the big problems is the question of trust, right? The question around how is data being used is become subject to a lot of concern, and well, I think we are in a situation where there's a lot of distrust about what's happening with the data. So the regenerative part, and that's why it sort of said degeneration versus regeneration, can we shift sort of broader understanding of data use from, as I said, using this data, accumulated data for a public good, right? So that's the regenerative part of it. And that, issues around trust, ownership, methods of collecting data, what is being done with it is the heart of the regenerative intention. The metastable intentions are also perhaps around this issue of, well, there's going to be a lot of pushback if this is attempted. I mean, this is again not unprecedented. Quick example would be, well, if a country, for instance, is not able to produce medicine, say a cancer drug, which is used in another part of the world, and India doesn't have it, there is you can invoke something like a compulsory licensing, right? That country does not have that, and you get certain royalties, and it's produced. So there is a precedent that there is a lot of public, resource being used for creating data centers, for instance, right? So if data can be subsidized, why can't it at the collective level, at the aggregate level, be also used for a kind of public good purpose? So the tension will be around figuring out what is a good kind of public policy measure to be able to what should one say, navigate through these elements. Moving on to the last part, the emergent design moves is, for instance, what are some interesting or useful kinds of cases that one could demonstrate, even at city level or at, for the sake of argument, ward level, etc., which could get people's curiosity up, and that there is some potential good cases used for addressing these kinds of public good problems. So the big problem is the collective good. That's always the tension all over the world, right? How do we transform collective good into behavior into public good? So these were some things we thought of, and yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very relevant subject for many of us, right? The data centers and what happens with our data, the growth of AI, all of those things. I think we could have a whole separate afternoon conversation or more about that. But one question that I might ask in that context is, of what good is data for nature? I mean, if really data centers exploit the natural, the cultural, the social capital of a region, and they're sort of colonial in a way that they do that, they're very extractive, of what use is data to nature, and how can we change that?
There's a quick answer to that. For instance, so there's a research organization in Norway which is able to map the forests all over the world. And if there are, for instance, remote areas, if the fire is there in some parts of the forest, it's able to tell the countries that you have a forest fire, and do something about it quickly. So there are some ways that you can redeem these things. But you have a important question. Yes.
Great. Thank you. All right, this table. Who speaks for this table?
So in our table, we were, I think, a bunch of beginners and a professor. So our discussion was we couldn't find one similar topic to relate, so we tried to, navigate all these questions through our individual experiences and interest topics. So we tried to, if somebody was not able to understand the question or, navigate what system it is, we tried to, map it out for them. So if we'll start, my area of concern is urban water governance, and it's mainly for domestic provision of water and how the governance shift is affected. So I identify this system as a social technical system because water as a basic right, and then the pipelines and everything that the fluidity of the resource makes it a technical system to get to the basic right of it. So then she talked about the ecological entrepreneurship, and we try to base that into a system. Then we break down those ecological entrepreneurship domain into some kind of element so that we can know more about the system that it can relate to. And she came up with indigenous ecological system. That is something that we did as a group. And for her, it was, she is an educationist and professor, so she, in my understanding, I might be wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong. So she, acts as a bridge or a consultancy through what the budgeting and industry do to the lime, what is that, lime? Yeah, lime producers. So acting as a bridge for the budgeting and everything, the rights of lime producers and everything. So she does that. And he is more interested in agriculturist fisheries, basically. And he was talking about the kinds of reforms that are taking place in fisheries, where the mediatories and intermediaries have more voices than the people who are producing the fishes. So that kind of system that we're talking about. And for the regenerative intention, for me, it was more more so on knowledge, like from policy to practice, like what kinds of institutional changes, what is the ground reality of the institutional changes or the changes in governance arrangements. And she was talking about how tribal women entrepreneurship is something that she wants to, that is at stake, and that could help. And again, for her, it was the conditions and rights of lime producers, and how ecologically also she has changed her area of interest. Shows she's basically a biologist, so she wants an ecological context to all this producing systems and industries. So that's one thing that we discussed. And for metastable attentions, for me, it's equity. People living in urban, informal settlements in urban areas should have water, which is a basic right, of course. And she was also talking about like the contradiction of how to use it and convert it to sustainable livelihood. Not sustainable, but like livelihood purpose. So these were the things that we talk about. We didn't move to the final point because we were discussing, navigating how to get in all the questions.
And I think you're sort of bringing in indigenous perspectives, I think, is absolutely essential, because a lot of the indigenous voices have been engaged in this conversation for a very long time. And so regeneration is actually not anything new, but it's a framework that hopefully we can build into the broader world for bigger conversation. But I think indigenous perspectives are key. So thank you for bringing that in. All right, the last but not least table.
Yes, we didn't have a common discussion like this. So one example I can take mine so that others. I'm system and stakes. I'm talking about the business and human rights. Why exploitation? Why the employer-employee relationship? I'm talking about it. Why employers are in a state of exploiting the employees. And at the same time, I'm putting the question towards why the women or employees are living under the exploitative conditions, why they are not able to raise their concerns. So these two, and the regenerative intention, the knowledge and practices would be the non-exploitative. The non-exploitative is done by the employer, and the employees living in the exploitative situations. This is the things we have to regenerate with the knowledge practices, how the both of them can accommodate. The meta-attention is the system which is existing inside the factories, purchasing practices. Because of the purchasing practices, the employer says so all these reasons, and then it ultimately leads to the lack of economic viability and harassment and abuse, all these things. So this to handle this, co-design with the participants, and also open-ended questions, not only confirmatory ones. Through this, we can bring a regenerative model which can work inside address the equally business and human rights, move together in a better way.
Well, thank you, everyone. I know we went just a little bit long, and apologies, Dr. Amar, for doing that, but I think it was really wonderful for me to hear, and hopefully for your colleagues here to hear these different perspectives, different approaches to something new. And we understand that this is a new terrain. It's like a sandbox to play in, and hopefully you can take at least a few grains of sand with you when you leave, that you can help to build. I'm going to stop that metaphor. Help to build a sandcastle or something. But I think I'm going to turn over the microphone to Dr. Amar. So, thank you.
Thank you for Thank you for making us think, reflect, and share. It is a part of the process of a workshop, so we should have had more time to even do in the first round. It's a very individual journey into it, so we're entering into that. So that was the first round, and we got into our research practice, and we had a chance to reflect and share. That was necessary. So a little modification that we're going to do is Professor Dev will now take it up, taking you further into, okay, this is how you think, but okay, can you actually take it into your research journey further? And how do you do it? What are the tools, techniques, methods that could be used? So that's where we will go there, and we will not have the last one before lunch. We should go and have our lunch well, and then come back and see what we can do after that. So step by step, one at a time.
I am Professor Deb, and I am a professor of strategy in the B School, and my area of research is strategy and systems, where I see strategy as a practice through the systems lens. So Professor Ray has set the tone with the philosophical understanding of the system thinking. Then Professor Powell ended with identifying context with the systemic issues. Now, when you study a system, you end up with enormous data, observations. How do you condense the data to the meaningful outcomes? What is your understanding before I take it out? What is your understanding? One way of seeing that, like Professor Ray was ending, the last slide was a complex system, a model, where variables are interconnected. So the question is, how do we arrive to that model, to the data, from an observation to the data? One way the practitioner do, like Professor Ray was talking, the practice or the exercise that you have been doing, that you identify in the beginning, you are identifying from your experience the causal connections. Therefore, you are building a conceptual diagram in the beginning. Now, look at a researcher is trying to understand a system's phenomena and gather data, maybe a focus group, the group is giving the data, maybe an informal conversation or a formal conversation, you are gathering data, or maybe your own observation, right? You are not a part of the context, you are observing the context, you are gathering data. Now, what is your understanding to condense this data into a systemic model? Anybody?
First, we see the patterns, if there are any patterns emerging.
Okay.
Then see if there are any linkages into different kind of patterns.
How do you find the patterns?
If they are repeating but in different ways.
Okay. So, essentially you are saying that identify a pattern. Yeah. The pattern will give us what at the end? Where would I end?
Pattern would give certain, for lack of any other word, some categories on which I can put this emergence of patterns into this category and this common things into this category.
A conceptual, it will give a conceptual key understanding. Okay, yeah.
I would say a knowledge or a perspective should have to identify the pattern.
Okay. Now, what I am trying to understand, what I am trying to tell that, me as a researcher, now seeing the data, processing the data to some meaningful outcome, and a audience, a reader is reading me. Now, how the reader will understand what I am trying to say? What would be my contribution to the literature? What is the new thing? How do I condense the data to the meaningful outcome?
Organize it to communicate meaning.
Organize, okay, yeah.
Also like setting the context, setting the story.
Setting the story.
What kind of systems are we looking at? So are we looking at phenomena as systems or artifacts as a system? Because
We are talking of the soft systems, not engineering systems. Soft. Yeah, phenomena, a phenomena. Come again, madam. Okay, you will be giving a recommendation from that. Okay. Okay. Any other? Yeah.
We usually get data and we need to know the context in which that data is originated or generated. And when we are trying to analyze data, we have a question or a purpose for that. So we are trying to understand this data, what is talking me about what kind of relationships, what kind of history, and who is generating that for what.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Now, I will be talking on the qualitative system modeling. How to come up with the models, system models from the qualitative data. Especially I am grounding in the ethnography and grounded theory. Those who are aware of that, you understand ethnography and grounded theory. So, there are two approaches with the same data set. We will be developing two different models, the same data sets. So, in the beginning, suppose the researcher is developing a semi-structured interview or a focus group, and from there is trying to develop models. So, there are three approaches. One approach is called the rigorous interpretive quotation RIQ analysis. The second is a cause effect relationship from the microstructure analysis. Third is a qualitative comparative analysis, and we will be using these two. If time permits, we can talk on that, these two models on the data set. From the larger data set, what I did, I have created, the data set is broken down to some quotations. Are you able to see these quotations? These quotations, from these quotations, what I am trying to do, I will be applying the second model called the causal relationship, the cause and effect relationship, the microstructure. So, the data may be, the data set may be bigger, much bigger, huge, but I have taken some of the quotations which I feel important and which I feel there may be a causal relationship. Now, read the first quotation. Do you find the context is the rural drinking water problem in India, the drinking water problem in India. Now, could you frame a causal relationship? There is a cause, there is a context, there is a variable which is related to another variable, outcome, cause and outcome. The first one is saying that since we women go to the pump every day, we notice quickly when it starts making strange sounds or the water flow reduces, we immediately tell the committee. So, repairs happen before it fully breaks down. How do you set the the causal relationship. Now, the same, if you look at what I did, women are responsible for the hand pump functionality. Yeah. Similarly, the second quotation, when pump is not working properly, we simply cannot get enough water. Even a small problem reduces the water flow, and we spend hours trying to collect just a few parts. The second one, look at from the cause effect relationship, the causal link, the hand pump functionalities leading to the water access. It may be positive, the polarity, it may be negative depending upon the context. Right? Now, then the third quotation, when I am analyzing, if the pump gives us enough water, then we rely only on that clean source, but the moment our access drops, we turn to other places like the well or stored water, which are not as clean. Now, the third causal link is water access to the water quality. The fourth one, whenever we start using those other sources, the children fall sick very quickly. The water looks clean, but it is not safe. We always see more stomach problem, the water quality drops. So, what I am doing? Water quality lead to reported illness. Then, once a few people fall sick and report it, others also start checking their families, and soon more cases come out. It becomes clear that that something is wrong with the water. So, the reporting is amplifying. Once somebody starts report, again the reporting increases. When so many people got sick, everyone agreed that we must fix the pump. People themselves said, let us put money together quickly, otherwise this illness will not stop. So, again we are establishing causal relationship. Reported illness leading to maintenance funding. Once people see that their contributions actually go towards repair, they feel more confident to pay again. They say, if our money solves the problem, we are ready to give. Maintenance funding is leading to willingness to pay maintenance. Because everyone was willing to contribute, we could call the mechanic immediately. Without the willingness, the repair would have been delayed for the weeks. Willingness to pay for maintenance is leading to repairs. After the pump was repaired, we stopped depending on the container or the stored water. We went back to using the hand pump because it was working properly again. Repairs leading to the household use of container water. When pump fails, we have to carry container water long distance, and it is always the women who end up doing the extra work. We feel the burden of the most. Household use container water again impacting the women. Look at, we are closing, we started with the women, we are closing with the women again, because we use the pump the most. We always inform the committee the earliest. That is how the pump stays functional. We started with women with the hand pump functionality. So, once you rearrange the loop, or once you rearrange the causal connection, it will end up with this kind of loop called the causal loop diagram. This is a system dynamic modeling that we are developing from the qualitative data. We are starting with the women and we are ending with there. It's all depend upon, you can see the behavior of the loop, it is endogenous. If unless an exogenous force is impacted on it, it will go on doing that. It's revolving, it may amplify. Suppose, so it's called the reinforcing loop. It reinforces, all are positive polar. Look at the polarity, all are positive. If you get, so in the similar loop, if you get negative polarity, instead of positive impact, so negative impact. If they are in the odd numbers, it's a balancing loop. It's moving up, reinforcing somewhere, again negative comes, it will restrict, constant balance. So this is one way of using the qualitative data to the system dynamic modeling. Later on you can see the system behavior, right. Now the second one, yeah, this one developed by me. The information is of course not from the field, I just created for developing a loop, all right. Some of the information based on my understanding developed the loop. I think what has happened?
So do we develop this loop manually ourselves, or there is some software that we can use to develop this?
So there are softwares for the model you need to input. So what you can develop, so this is developed manually, because you yourself is reading the microstructure. So what you are doing from the data, you are reading, rereading, then identifying the codes where you get some causal connection. Now when you read the entire data set, there may be so many causal connections which I did not bring here, because I try to identify the quotations with the causal connection which are where the variables are interconnected, right. Suppose some other causal connections which I did not bring, I may create another loop. There may be multiple loops that will be working in a context on a system. The first method, where instead of system dynamics, I am developing a system thinking, I am trying to identify the key dimensions of the system or the key aspects of the system. Look at the same quotation, I have broken them down to different codes. Daily interaction with the hand pump, code 2, early detection of malfunction signs, the same quotation. Code 3, prompt reporting to the committee. Then different codes, code 7, 8, the different codes, it is completely coded. And then what I did, when I am coding, I got some 23 codes. This is a qualitative coding, when in the grounded theory or thematic analysis or in the ethnography, this is called the qualitative coding. From the codes, what I have done, I created a master list of codes, the master data codes. So altogether 23 codes have been developed. Now what I have done, the concept that sir was talking, that I have condensed the codes to a higher level categorization in the grounded theory approach. So the related codes are categorized, a higher level of categorization, code 1 and code 2 categorized and jargonized as a routine use as informal surveillance. Similarly 4, 5 workload driven sensitivity. So since I am arranging it in order, but it can be random also. You will be seeing somewhere code 1921. So enabling rapid responses. So this is how the codes have been converted into the categories. Now, the categories are even grouped together at a higher level called the themes. The category 1, routine use as informal surveillance, workload driven sensitivity, local reporting and governance responses, is categorized as the community monitoring and early detection. Similarly, the 3 other categories developed from different codes: disruption to water reliability, exposure to unsafe alternatives, health impact on the vulnerable groups. So, water access, breakdown and risky coping. Similarly, recognition of water related crisis, community decision making and mobilization. These 2 categories are grouped to make the theme social risk amplification and collective action. And the last 3, trust building through transparency, enabling rapid repair responses, and return to the safe water, reduced burden. So, this has been developed group to make the theme trust, repair, effectiveness and system restoration. Now, there are 4 themes developed. These 4 themes are the key dimension of the system. All right. So, how do I put it? Suppose say the issue there can be 4, if I can put it there. So, how do we put these 4 dimensions? Suppose there is a drinking water issue. So, in the visual representation, the dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3 and dimension 4 dimensions. Now, the recent scholarship has connected these dimensions into a systemic connection, in the causal connection. What they did, the discussion is that since these themes have formed from the codes, from the data, now identify, go to your original data. Once you are done with this, go to the original data and find out, look at the codes, look at are there any causal connection like the first one we studied between 4 and 2 in the codes. Connection between 4 and 2 at the thematic level, right. So, this is how the recent scholarship have developed, and so these are 2 methods. The third method is called the qualitative comparative analysis. In the beginning you identify through coding process all possible variables in the system. When you are talking about the system now, when Professor Pavel was ending in the exercise, you identify a system, you imagine a system boundary. Once you have the system boundary, analyze the data and find out all possible variables as the system components. Then what you do? All system components 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, suppose say there are 5 system components. Now analyze one by one. This 5th is called the outcome, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are called the condition. Condition 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now see the data set. Which one influencing is causing to 5? If yes, 1, 1. Now the same data set you are seeing is not only 1. Suppose 2 and 3, 4 are not causing, put it 0. Now the same data set you are finding is not only 1, it is also 2 causing the outcome. So write 1. That means 5 is caused by 1 and 2 together. This is called qualitative comparative analysis. There can be a model also, there are multiple models, but this is how you can establish a qualitative comparative analysis.
So, Professor, when we do the network graph theory, then we follow the same principle?
Yes, the same principle. The other one I think my colleagues have been using is called the interpretive structural modeling. But the ISM modeling also gives the same connection A lead to B. Here you get In the previous, the first one we discussed A lead to B. And second is B lead to C. Here if A lead to C, you will say that A lead to C. Second B lead to C, you will say that B lead to C. But in interpretive structural modeling, transitivity, they said A lead to B and B lead to C. So they said A lead to B, B lead to C. First two models, they have been used in developing the system models, and I hope you understood it. And I have got a small exercise. Of course, we will not do it now. The exercise we can discuss later in the Q&A. How many of you are interested or have been doing the research papers and publishing that, doing research, academic research and publishing that? Could you raise your hand? In almost each group you have been doing. Now you have seen that there are so much of frustration of publishing, right? One side publication is connected to the career, promotions and all. Second, there are too many paper mills. There are issues with the editors and all, so many submissions, unable to find the reviewers kind of thing. Could you take this as a system, this issue as a system, discuss in your team and develop a paragraph from your discussion, and could you apply both the models? The first model is the causal loop diagram. Could you come up with a causal loop diagram? Second, you apply the second one. The second one broadly use something called a complex adaptive system, the complex system, social system, where you identify the key aspect of the system, right? If you could do that, then I would be happy to hear to you.
Sir, the second one on the left hand side, that is the complex adaptive system.
The left hand side was the complex adaptive system. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. That the first part was putting yourself in the context of the problem, and then the second part, and yourself as a researcher in the center, and it's important. The second parallel talks about the bringing in the regeneratedness into your problem, the context, and seeing the whole thing from that angle. So in simple terms, what we call, what I have seen or what I feel, this is my understanding, my colleagues, all of you. Of course, we would like your comments or your thoughts, not even now, but subsequently as we become a community and work together. These are some of the questions to ask. And one simple thing that is happening here is if there is a particular axiology that is in operation, and that makes this all possible. So the axiology is that you take care of these two things, you have a flourishing state. And what is that? It reflects is the life below soil, that is the microbes, and life just above soil, that is the insects, what we call insects, but they are all living species, butterflies, honeybees, all the other insects. If you take care of these two, your farm flourishes. That is a kind of an observation, but what is the relationality? What is the relationship between these are just two species that I have indicated. It is about the microlife or microbiota in soil and the species above the soil. And the science of systems is actually can explain this better. So, there is a very comprehensive relationship that exists between the many species that for water it works and for production it works. So, the role of butterflies and honeybees in farming is pollination. So, if you want production and the yield that we have seen in this farm is around 2 times, 3 times in most crops. in all crops. It's always more than that. Water, we said, is 700%. Now it is 100% absorption. Every drop of rain that falls on this farm goes inside. So we say climate variations in rainfall is not an issue. It can rain anytime it wants to, but I'll hold it whenever it rains, and I'll use it whenever I want. Adapting to climate changes is possible. It really doesn't matter when it wants to rain. Let it rain whenever it wants to. I am not dependent on the rain when it falls, but our agricultural practice was based on a particular cycle which farmers are still not adapting to these changes. So, if I take care of what does this mean in terms of axiology? What does the system science talk about axiology? It's a very simple statement that it has, is saying that, does anyone have a chain? Anyone chain? Yes. So, chain means there are rings, isn't it? There are links. One is connected to the other. If I were to snap this, ma'am, if I were to snap this, where would it likely to snap? Give way? Is at the weakest link. So, the systems theory talks about the strength of a chain is strength of its weakest link. So, if you want to strengthen this chain, you have to work on the weakest. You have to work on the weakest of that chain. And if you think that this is a chain which is interconnected links, if your system is interconnected, then to strengthen that system, you have to work on the weakest. Isn't it so? Yeah, very simple logic. Now, in a farming system which is broken, which you saw in initial image, which is a broken system, you have to repair it, you have to take care of the weakest of that system. So, the weakest below the soil and weakest above the soil. When Pavel is asking you this question, what is the regenerative component in your research work? Are you able to see from that angle? How do you look at your research problem? You can be neutral to this issue, thus you say, is axiology free? Is value free? Research is value free. Thank you. If research is value free, it's a very good analysis. But if you want impact and you want a regenerative impact, then you have to also figure out what is the axiology that would be coherent to your goal. So, methodological coherence also requires axiological coherence. Would that work for every research problem that you have? If you want your research problem to become regenerative, then would the systems theory work? Yeah? Will it differ for different questions? Whether it is information technology or whether it is public policy or whether it is any other, urban problems, or we had many more interesting issues, poverty, water, any problem that we take, does that work? That if you take care of the weakest of that system will get towards flourishing state. Does it make sense?
Sometimes it's not very self-evident what is the weakest. Here it is perhaps, but not that one can fool oneself that yes, there are some things which should be weak, which may not be very abundantly clear in socio-technical systems.
Yeah. So, we have to look for it. As researchers, that is the job. And it is not one type of weakest. Psychological weakest, economically weakest, politically weakest, socially weakest. So many kinds of informationally weakest, so many kinds of weaknesses are there. So, now Thus, among them, we have to then see how to prioritize. That's not research, that's getting into impactful action, but from a good understanding of how systems operate. So, that is when you go into transdisciplinary action. So, one is to understand systems, diagnose the system. The last slide of Professor Ray was diagnosing at the first level of diagnosis of a complex system. What Dave took you to is now see the relationships of, you see the cycles are connected in some way, and then having got that cycle, then you say, okay, these cycles are both degenerative as well as regenerative. So, segregate the two. And quite often when you can segregate the two, then you can say, okay, this is how I am going to intervene. So, between the segregation, between the two models, then you will ask those questions as Pavel was asking, that is it regenerative or is it degenerative? So, you have to use all this. I mean, that is a fantastic sessions that we had. It was, you know, bringing you first, and then when you bring in the element of the person, I as a person from outside, and that is the image that Eisen explained. The researcher sees himself as an outside observer, studying the phenomena and suggesting, recommending to the world what should be done. The other is you are part of the system. That means you are responsible to that system. That means you have to be the change that you want to see. That is Gandhi's statement, right? Be the change you want to see. So, the individual as a researcher has to transform oneself to be regenerative, so that systems that you are in or we are in can move towards being regenerative. I can't be just a prescription provider as an analyst from outside. Can you see that this is the experience that comes? I mean, he could have spoken for any other thing. Professor Ray could have spoken on so many things, you know, but he went and focused what is systemic, that you are part of the system, and to be able to take that responsibility, to be able to make the difference, and not seeing the change to happen, but being the change that we want to see, which means it becomes very, very difficult. You are not just a researcher. It is far beyond being a researcher, and that is how we can see the change. So, that is coming to the point of axiology. Well, this is, I think I should stop here, because this is an old stuff. This is how we do research. It is very disciplinary. This is the, you know, research, mainstream research that we do. And systems science, how young it is. Professor Ray, what do you think? How young is, or how old is systems thinking among researchers?
Among researchers, different interpretations, different initiatives. If you go back to Russian scholars in the late 19th century, you pick up on Bill Blanty and others in Austria who were concerned about reductionism and the loss of focus on the properties of whole organisms in the 1930s and 40s. You can see the Macy conferences in the US after the Second World War, which brought together a whole set of people from different disciplines and created cybernetics and systems science in academia and in big companies, some of which was unhelpful ultimately, and some of it which has led to much better things.
And I was with IFSA 2018 integrated farming systems in agriculture, the UK, European Association?
The work on farming systems research started in the CGIR network, the International Agricultural Research Centres, and on the back of their development, and, although their view of systems was different. One of the first jobs I had as a young new academic in 1985 was to help run an international conference between people from different parts of the world involved in farming systems research. And the people I brought in from Australia did agro-ecosystems analysis, agroecology, Richard Morton, and a group of books that we did systemic agriculture, systems agriculture. But there was a schism in that community in 1985 between those who saw farming systems as real and you had to just model them and quantify them, and those who saw systems as a device and a way of learning about situations. And that schism, in a way, has persisted ever since.
So you can see the transition that's taking place. It's so slow in the Indian context. Agricultural scientists are still not there, not thinking of it as a systemic problem, a systemic issue. Soil is weak, so put fertilizers. No? There is production low, so just increase the area hectares for growing that crop.
I was thinking that
Can you get the microphone? Yeah. So. Yeah, please go ahead.
I think this is kind of history from the Western science perspective, right? Because we have not just the Western science perspective, but the indigenous communities and a lot of local communities have this systems thinking too. So in several research or projects we have with them, we are trying to come up with all the knowledge they already have about these linkages and the way they use the way of thinking, the way of knowledge generation. They have their own. So we all are locals. We all know that. So I think system thinking has older roots that we think.
Indeed, the case. We know of terms like Ubuntu, Ukama, which are very old, oldest civilizations have talked about this. In India, we call Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is the epitome of the Vedas. So these concepts are inbuilt, but as researchers, as typical researchers, how old is this? So that's relatively young. So we have broken from there and come to this method of research, disciplinary research. And of course, we're saying that, well, there are different types. This is what I was referring to. I took to cover half of it, we took how many, 19 classes or 20 classes, and still it's not sufficient. So the subject is too vast, but it's just, as we said, the whole workshop is just an introduction to this complex subject. And from half of that, you can see that there are historical, survey, grounded theory, case research, ethnographic. In between action research, we have multidisciplinary, intersectional studies, interdisciplinary, then transdisciplinary, then you can do many other combinations. So, and then I was referring to, or I referred to, the ecosystemic transdisciplinary action research, which is what I keep applying. So, well, I think I should skip this so that we have more interactions. The nature of orientation, nature of reality, the purpose, nature of data collection can spread across this spectrum from one end to the other end. So, it has different methodologies that we come up with. And following that, there are many types of methods that we adopt while doing research. So, but then there is a lot of diversity there. the question would be, is it coherent to the objective of regenerativeness, or is just an analysis of a situation? Analysis of a situation, a robust analysis of a situation would take you to a publication, not necessarily an impact. So that is where the researcher has to graduate to get to that level. So, in all this, of course, this paper I can share, which I think Eisen Ray referred very briefly. He did not want to bother us in the morning about epistemology, ontology. So, if one wants to go deeper, there is lots of stuff, and all of these have some ontologies and epistemologies of these methodologies that has evolved, and that needs to be studied to understand how we think in the current state of affairs, how we think, and if you want to get to regenerativeness, what would be more relevant in our thinking frameworks. So, that is what Pavel got you to think about those 4 steps, and that could be a starting way or starting process of getting into that domain. And so, we skip here, but I want to highlight this point that our focus often is, the standard focus is economic becomes the center of our objective, and sometimes we say it is social, and sometimes we think this is the most critical, but in my understanding the core is this. If the principles of this, is learned, understood and used to govern this, it is going to work out better. So, as I said, if I want water, I need to take care of microbes. That is a relationship that I am looking for, and there is it produces substantially. And if I understand that relationality, which is focused on the weakest, I can apply this to anthropocentric relationships, social relationships. And that is what you find in all your religious texts. The weak is at the center. Take care of the weak, you will have divine mercy. It is a way of presenting, but the idea is that weak becomes central. Weak becomes central. So, the relationships, fraternity, relationships, all these are talked about in both these fields. So, if you look at the values of constitution, most constitutions in the world would talk about fraternity. If you go to South American, it says solidarity. Now, this solidarity is not just here, solidarity with this, solidarity with the last species on your ecosystem, and that is the level of ecological transition that is required, just not focused on the human level, but going beyond human and other species. So, that is how it goes. The 8 dimensions that you have for the conference, those 8 tracks these are the tracks that you have seen, those who are attending the conference.
I just wanted to add something, to emphasize something you said, which I think is really important. You mentioned that that when we're trying to address the problem of the soil, if we say the weakness is the soil, the traditional approach is just to add chemicals, so it kind of looks like you're taking care of the weak, but you're not. You're just making the situation worse, and we need to think about how are we taking care of the weak, in what manner. I'm sure you've all heard this, if you teach someone to fish, then you take care of them for life, whereas you just give them a fish, you'll feed them for a day. So we've got to get to the root cause of what the real problem is, addressing the weak, and then we can truly help them.
cannot go in. These have relations, and just taking ecological system has a very complex network. And if you take all of them, it becomes, if you take around 8, let me, if I have it. Can you use the microphone? Oh, okay. So if you take, there are around, with these dimensions, there are spectrums of factors. Each of them, there are around 40 factors and around 80 opposite variables. So if I take 80 variables and do a permutation combination, in about 5 levels, it reaches infinity. It becomes infinite number of combinations. And that is why it is very difficult to deal with these complex elements. So, the other part, I think it came in the discussions, is more than the elements, it is about the processes. Systems analysis or systems approach to solving problem is more to do with processes than the elements themselves, but causalities first we have to establish and then understand the processes. So, that is when you are saying that it is just not what is weak, but the processes. Those are the factors, the elements, but the relationships of these is what we need to probably understand better to be able to resolve these complex issues. Because for instance, you say that now in that farm condition, I can just leave it like that for a year or two. Whenever I want to start it, I can restart. It takes me 3 months to put it back. It is about focusing on the processes, not really on each and everything. Each and everything is taken care of by the species themselves. But I know the relationships that exist, so I have to just take care of those processes to retain those relationships. It may look a little abstract. We need to really do that whole process to get in there. So, in summary, I wanted to highlight this point that we are looking for coherence and balance, but this is a coherence and balance, particularly from methodological point of view. The coherence and balance, and I seek your attention and critique to this. This is what I think, but I would like your thoughts and reflections on this. Coherence and balance in the context of, particularly coherence in the context of ontology, epistemology, logic and axiology, and balance is required particularly when it comes to actions, and this becomes extremely important at the stage of actions, and I may take a minute to explain that a bit. When I am doing my research and modeling, I am largely working on my own or a few of my researchers. So, I can count the others having or free of any axiology, or I can say my model is axiology free. But when I come to action, when I have to work together, I know that each of us have our values, and unless there is a coherence in that values, our commitment to work on that is not deep. So, we can go and do some work, that is where most of the collective actions end up becoming a private gain. Most of the collective actions, we start with collective actions, but because our intentions and that is not put on the table, there is no coherence in our intentions, we have hidden agenda while we do these collective actions. So, this hidden agenda should also be tabled out to say that what is our common minimum, what do we agree on, what is our commitment and how do we actually go about working on this, what is our axiological coherence, do we have a coherence, because the more is the coherence, the longer are we going to work, we are committed to that. So, in real life people are not free of values, we all have our values and it has to be tabled to discuss what do we agree in common with regard to how we are going to go about. While the Indian constitution or any constitution has its constitutional values. And that makes that country, it gives its identity. But this was imposed on us, so we have not deliberated that this should be our values. Some leaders thought that this should be the values, but we as a group have not at least discussed or deliberated that this should be our values. We say fraternity is value, but this is for it's in the textbook or it's in the constitution, but in day-to-day work we are just washing out for ourselves, not fraternity, not the other, but myself. So, when Ray is putting the self inside the context, that self is also part of the context in an interconnected system, that individual is not outside of the context, is not outside the context, is part of the context. So, if I am connected to the context, then system science would tell that take care of the weakest to strengthen your system. Then you as an individual or I as an individual is not the most significant one. So, that is a complete variation to the individual identity centered approach of looking at the world, vis-a-vis saying everyone is part of the system. So, that is an axiological shift in our understanding of how we look at ourselves. I will leave it there, it is too much of the thing. I think that is why Ray and Pavel and Dave did not want to deliberate on this. And of course, they went to the technicalities, but all of these steps are required to get this systems perspective at transdisciplinary into function. So, we know that these are common given things: interconnectedness, interdependence and interaction. Whether we like it or not, everything is interacting. And that is how you describe what you meant by regenerativeness when Pavel mentioned what do you understand of regenerativeness. You reflected these points. We have lost that there, but if you go back to your whatever you said, they reflect all this. It's evolving, it's interacting, right? Some of you said it's evolving, it's not, it's emerging, it's evolving. These are all part of the interaction, and everything is about interaction which reflects processes. It's not the element itself, but it's the reaction between the elements which produces whatever it produces. The temperature, pressure of the reaction would also give you different compounds, not the same compounds. So, the first three while are given axioms, these are given axioms, it exists. The only thing that is left is the intentionality. It is our intentionality which is only degree of freedom that we have. So, this degree of freedom that we have, intentionality, whether it is about self or it is about the other, makes the whole world of difference. If I take, I recall now Dr. Prashant Narnavare, I must give that example. So, he was a collector when I went to research the district. He sits here, Prashant Narnavare is here. So, I asked him, you as a district collector, you have so many things to do. You must be having some timetable or something that you have in order to prioritize your work. So, very interestingly he told me, I think you remember now, that he said, my focus is on children who have asked for scholarships and those children who do not have anyone. Then to verify that, I said, can you show me your written diary, whatever you are making your. So, he gave me and he had written that. So, I was convinced that what he is saying and what he has written is true. Then I asked him, why is your focus this scholarship for the poor child? You have so many things to do, you have your industry people coming, all kinds of work in the district, why this is your priority? And he told this to me then. He said, look, for the companies, there are lots of people, they will follow up even if I forget about them. They will not leave me in peace. They will follow up. They have people, they have resources, they will follow up. But this poor child who has small stipend, he has no one to follow up. So I have to do it for him. So the element of, again, taking care of the weak, and that made him a very well known officer of the state, and of course he rose to many levels after that. He was given reference by the academy which trains the officers that he is a good officer, you can review his district. So this is inbuilt in the personality of how they make a difference in the workplace. Am I right in interpreting, or yeah? When I saw you, I recall the situation, and all of us enjoy that situation where we have taken care of the weak. Our joy, maximum joy, is when we recall what Gandhi's talisman talks about. Gandhi's talisman is a standard phrase in India, particularly for public officers, that whenever you are in a dilemma of decision making, you recall the face of the poorest that you have ever seen. And if your decision can bring smile to that face, go ahead, you will never be wrong. It's pure system science. Right? Nothing much to elaborate, I think you understand that. No? So it's very thoughtful of all these nice words, but you can now codify and see that you can establish a science around it as to what has been already said by different people. So it's about the intentionality, whether it is self-centered or it is the other-centeredness. If it is other-centeredness, most likely you can achieve coherence. So, well, I'll stop here. It's a much more bigger, complex issue than this. It goes into a number of other issues starting from here, but leave you a thought with it. I'll leave you this thought with you, that there are ways of figuring out how to make your systemic analysis to regenerative practice. So these are some of the features. My colleagues and I together have put some different thoughts into for you to consider and reflect on, and hopefully it will get you to a better way of analyzing the reality and solving the problems of the reality. Thank you so much. May I invite my colleagues to come so that we can address questions, issues which we can all, or we can sit just here, but here maybe everyone can see, so please come up to the stage. And please feel free to give your comments, not only questions but comments, your thoughts, reflections. Can you give the microphone? We can move the microphone. We had a microphone somewhere. Yeah, Sean. No. We'll put on the lights.
Yeah, should I go ahead?
Yeah, please go
okay.
ahead.
So this is directed to you, Prof. Sabar, or anybody else perhaps. So I'm also new to the system approach. But one thing that sometimes one feels overwhelmed by the systems approach is that, and rightfully so, you have so many variables that interconnect with anything you want to do. Like, for instance, you gave the example of soil, right, or water, right. Mumbai, for instance, gets its water from 100 kilometers away, right.
From this place.
So there is that sense that, there's so many variables looking for, well, attention, right. But also in your presentation, you kind of, because you brought in the question of axiology and values, so there is also an issue of prioritization among these variables, right? So the brief question is that how do you kind of get out of this sense of that variables are flattened and there may be priorities in that, or or does that depend from problem to problem, right? The nature of prioritizing of variables as opposed to a very systemic understanding which seems to flatten all variables. Like for instance, we use the word stakeholder. All stakeholders are not equal, right? We know that. So that's,
yeah. So I'll give first reflection and ask my colleagues. So take this example of COVID situation and your own family as a context, who are you most concerned about during COVID in your own family? It's a situation to all of us. People who are more vulnerable. So you now can see the links there. So if the vulnerable will catch the virus first, and if it comes to the family, then all of us are at risk. So it is the principle. The vulnerability can be different. A young boy is suffering and is ill, and the old man in the family is actually stronger at that point of time. So in that context, the concept is vulnerability, not age. But in general, we know that infant will be more vulnerable than an adult. But in a given context, you have to see what is most vulnerable. I think that's a simple logic to apply. So there are some processes and principles that could guide us in different settings, irrespective of these settings. But I'll leave it to Mr.
Well, whilst I agree with what you've just said, I also need to point out that during COVID, there were other worldviews held by people in governance and government and decision-making. Economists who predicted said it made economic sense to allow certain classes of people to become more vulnerable more quickly because ultimately the societal cost would be different. We've learned since COVID that the impact on young people taken out of schooling has been psychologically and other things more so, but we didn't know that at the beginning perhaps, or didn't allow ourselves to know that. I think the point I'd make is that COVID was a situation of complexity and uncertainty where the globe really didn't know what to do, and most governments had fallen down badly in playing out and scenarioing situations like it. So they were very ill-equipped to deal with it. In Australia, the response was actually very good early on because the Prime Minister created a national cabinet and expanded the deliberations across all states, senior officials and ministers in the states, and allowed other expertise to come into the cabinet deliberations. So they approached COVID in a spirit of not knowing what to do and saying we need to learn our way into the future. Within months of that starting off and working very well, antagonisms reasserted themselves, and it became again a command and control model where they were competing and arguing with each other. So I think how you deal with the biological, ecological, social, and I'm not going to say economic because I personally regard the economic as a particular manner of being social, so it's a subsystem of being social.